evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, November 5th. And we are always meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish region. We have an amended agenda for us, Council. We've removed the fleet discussion. It will come back to us later this month. So motion to move the amended agenda. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any notice of motion? Seeing none. We have one delegation, and that is the Canadian Public Works Association National Public Works Police Award.
Evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. First thing that I would like to do tonight is I'd like to thank you for supporting us for Happy Public Works Week. Without your support, we wouldn't be in this position of being able to receive a prestigious award like this. So thank you very much for doing that. I guess what I should do is read the motion, because if you guys decide not to accept it, that's going to be awkward for Mr. Public Works Association. So I will just quickly read the recommendation that the District of Squamish Council receive the award from the Canadian Public Works Association, recognizing the District's Public Works Department for winning the National Public Works Week celebration contest for a community of 10,029,999.
Okay, here we go. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettition. This is where we would make comments. You want us to make those comments now? Councillor French?
I'm proud to have played a very small role in achieving this award, and very happy that we have the staff that we have and the professionalism within the district operations. And it's particularly pleasing for me that the grade 4-5 students were given an opportunity to understand how our district runs and what it takes behind the scenes to keep our streets free of snow in the winter and the sewer and the water running. So congratulations and thanks for your good work, your whole team.
So I'd heard about Public Works winning all sorts of awards, but this past year was the first time I actually got to see it firsthand and participate, go through the whole program, and it was fantastic. I've been through a couple of forums and so on recently, and one of the things they touch on is sometimes a lack of public awareness of what different levels of government are responsible for and what they do, and I think this is a really fantastic program to help give people some understanding of what everyone here does, and really proud to be part of it, and thank you for putting it on.
Councillor Anderson?
Our Public Works Department really understands show business. I've been to a number of open houses in the past at the Municipal Works Yard, and for the program delivery of education, orientation, and fun for both the public and our youth. It just gets better every time.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you. I was very impressed with the with the event, and I got there at the end of the sort of last batch or two of the school kids, and I was really, the part that really struck me, besides how excited the kids were with seeing the toilet work and where it goes and all that, all the staff's on really high energy, and I know that the kids generally can be draining at times. But sort of that second part of it that I didn't really see that much detail on here, where you had some of the people from the office were driving a grader around trying to move a ball and all these sort of, and I thought it was just amazing, very, very inclusive, and everyone was, the people that normally drive that machine were sitting back and having a laugh watching someone trying to wrestle with it, and I thought it was a great environment, and yeah, congratulations to all those involved. Awesome.
Councillor Race?
Thank you, and once again, Mr. Smith, congratulations. This is not the first time, and I think members of council will sort of get the feel for the fact that this is the only time Mr. Smith shows up in a suit. Except for when he comes to budget begging for money.
Even then he doesn't.
But once again, congratulations, it's a great job.
Councillor Stoner?
So I am unfortunately the only counselor who wasn't able to make it, and I'm still super sad that I missed it. But Mr. Smith, you started off by saying thanks to us for our support, but it's really you and your team and the passion that you guys bring to your work and your willingness to share your work with our community that makes it so easy to support the work that you do. So thanks to you, to the folks that you work with, for everything that you do in our community, and I hope and that I'll be there next year so I can see it for myself.
So I really support all the comments that have been made. In just reviewing the application that went into the CPWA, you just turn the page and it's like, oh wait, there's more. Oh, there was more. And I think not only does it engage our community, but it engages our staff as well. And I know that some of our staff took advantage of the opportunity to go and tour and understand more about what their colleagues do. I think I've only missed one in my 5 years on council. It is a fantastic event. It does. I agree with my colleagues. It gets better every year. And so it's just really wonderful that you've been recognized along with the staff for what's gone into this event. And the amount of pride and effort shows in the caliber of the event that you put on. So thank you for that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to just take this quick opportunity to thank my staff, the engineering staff. They help us significantly. That day couldn't happen without them. And I want to do a special thank you to Kayla Mori. She put that package together, and it was amazing. I think that was one of the big parts of why we won that. So it was a very well put together package. So I'd like to put those thanks out. And if it's okay for Mr. Matt Brown from the Canadian Public Works Association to come up.
Absolutely.
Great.
Welcome, Mr. Brown.
So good evening and thank you for having me. Mayor Elliott, council members, Mr. Smith, Mr. Kingshencho, Mr. Muan, Ms. Mori, and all the public works staff. My name is Matt Brown, and I am a member of the CPWA Board of Directors. It's a privilege to be here in Squamish to present CPWA's 2019 National Public Works Award to the District of Squamish in recognition for a 2019 National Public Works Week celebration and educational events. Each year in May, National Public Works Week recognizes the tens of thousands of men and women across North America who provide and maintain infrastructure and services collectively known as public works. Municipalities throughout the U.S. and Canada celebrate National Public Works Week with open houses, project and facility tours, parades, educational events, press conferences, school visits, and career events. Municipalities also use this week to recognize their staff, the men and women who play such an important role in our community's vitality. CPWA's award honor these efforts to promote National Public Works Week, one of the best ways to increase public awareness with the importance of public works and the services public works provides to our communities. This year, Squamish competed with other Canadian municipalities of populations of 10,000 to 30,000 and won the award for a second year in a row. In addition to Mayor Elliott's public proclamation declaring May 19th to 25th National Public Works Week, Squamish Public Works Week included an interactive demonstration, equipment rodeo, infrastructure tours, and it was all open to the public. In addition to this, more than 350 elementary students, teachers, parents visited the Public Works yard to learn more about heavy equipment, horticulture, fleet maintenance, and wastewater collection and treatment. The evaluators also credited the district for its focus on public works as a career choice through the participation in a career fair with the Quest University. CPWA is honored to recognize the District of Squamish for the National Public Works Week efforts. Public works services, personnel, and our infrastructures are essential parts of our community do not always receive a high level of public awareness. National Public Works programs, like events of Squamish, go a long way to provide the awareness, and I would like to thank all the Public Works staff, in particular Ms. Mori, for sending Squamish's submission, and all the staff who made this a special week. So Mr. Smith, Mr. Kingshenko, Mr. Lamont, Ms. Maury, I'm pleased to present the CPWA National Public Works Award, recognize the District of Squamish and its commitment to and dedicated public works staff. On behalf of CPWA, congratulations to all the volunteers made successful. Many thanks. We usually do a picture, so. You guys are welcome.
Yeah, are you good? Yeah. I feel like you should receive the award.
Chris is only got it more.
Yeah, Chris, these are all up there.
Yeah, Chris, you're in the shirt. Okay.
Some people might like to squeeze in.
Come on now.
But go in front, you're not all going to fit
Everyone's gonna fit.
Are we gonna fit?
Yep. Karen or Bob?
Thank you. He has enough fresh air. Can't concentrate on this. It's stuffy and closed in here. Okay, any consideration of unscheduled public attendance? So this is anyone who feels they have an issue that they need to speak to council about, but it can't wait for 2 weeks until the next regular business meeting. Seeing none. We have one scheduled item tonight. That is development permit number 501, the Aegean. Okay, so we'll have a presentation by staff, and then there is an opportunity for the public to speak to the variances on this. I will turn it over to staff.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher. I'm a planner with the Community Planning Department. Tonight I'm presenting a development permit application for a property located at 1360 Victoria Street, downtown Squamish, for council consideration. Development permit number 501 includes one variance. This is the second time council is considering DP 501. It was first considered at the special council meeting on September 30th, 2019, where council chose to send the application back to staff with direction to the applicant to resolve their compliance with 3 areas of the development permit area guidelines. These areas are outdoor space, energy efficiency, and public view corridors. So this presentation will include a quick refresher summary of the development permit. 1360 Victoria Street is located in the downtown commercial core. The site is a corner lot fronting 2nd Avenue and Victoria Street with a lane providing access directly to the east. The site is vacant and has been used informally as a parking lot for the Chieftain Hotel in the past. The site is adjacent to the Squamish Hotel, to the west across 2nd Avenue, the Oasis Hostel to the south, and the Cornerstone Commercial Office Building to the east across the road. The site is zoned C4, as are all adjacent properties. Some nearby properties are zoned Assembly, P2 or P3. The OCP land use is Downtown Commercial Center, and it is in a flood hazard area. So this is a commercial office residential development. The development offers commercial and retail units on the ground floor and office space on the 2nd story. The bylaw requires that C4 developments provide a minimum of 20% of the gross floor area as employment space. This development is providing 657 square meters of gross floor area as employment space, or 22% of the gross floor area. There are 32 residential units located on the 4 top stories. The primary residential lobby and 2nd-story office entrances off of 2nd Avenue with a canopy and facade feature, while a secondary residential exit stair is located on Victoria Street. The first guideline that council requested that the applicant address was guideline 36.14D. This guideline suggests that sites provide areas within their outdoor amenity space with overhead weather protection to enable functional use of the site in the rain. The applicant has opted to include 325 square feet of architectural canvas, which will provide some sun and rain protection without compromising the solar gain of the adjacent residential units, which is a requirement of the energy efficiency guidelines. The drawings show one potential arrangement of the canvas, though the canvas will be adjustable depending on the season or weather experienced. The canopies are rigid and will withstand wind, and the canopies will not fill with water. The second guideline that council asked the applicant to address is guideline 36.18A, which suggests architectural steps can be taken to limit solar gain at the peak of summer, reducing the need for artificial cooling mechanisms while also maximizing solar gain in the winter, reducing the need for heating. This building meets this guideline by insetting windows and decks, which will provide both weather protection and limiting summer sun, as demonstrated in the diagram on the screen. Shading and weather protection is provided at the common open space at level 3. Commercial space is located primarily on the north side of the building, and the commercial space with direct sun exposure, the west-facing commercial space. Shade screens are proposed at level 2, while level 1 has been set back below a canopy that provides sun protection. Council requested that the applicant review their compliance with guideline 36.18D, which encourages the use of cool roofs and pavements. The use of cool roofs can help mitigate the urban heat effect, lower energy use, and GHG emissions. Lower energy use and lower GHG emissions are accomplished primarily through the reduced need for air conditioners during the summer months. Air conditioners, refrigerants emit GHGs. Cool roofs may, however, lead to greater need for heating during winter months as the building would retain less heat. This application proposes to use light-colored roofing cap sheet and a green roof. Light-colored roofing cap sheets are both emissive and reflective. In staff's opinion, the applicant has demonstrated that they meet this guideline. Following the presentation of DP 501 at the September 3rd council meeting, council requested a more robust view study to understand how the applicant was meeting this guideline. The DPA guidelines identify several important viewpoints to preserve from public spaces. Staff worked with the applicant to identify public realm views that would be impacted by the development. These 4 locations are identified on the slide. This is viewpoint A, located on 2nd Avenue, looking south in front of the Amaji building, which is currently under construction. It shows that the building, as proposed, will have a minimal view impact on views of the chief from outside the commercial spaces currently under construction. This is viewpoint B, and it shows that the proposed building will have an impact on the view of the chief from the sidewalk along Victoria Street. This view is already partially obstructed by the Cornerstone building at 37989 Cleveland Avenue. There are limited current and future opportunities for commercial spaces along the stretch of Victoria from 2nd Avenue to 4th Avenue, which implies that the space will likely continue to function as a pedestrian corridor rather than a public realm of significance or place of gathering. Limited existing views from the patio on 2nd Avenue will also be obstructed. However, the views from the majority of the patio appear to be limited in its existing state. This is viewpoint C, located on 2nd Avenue, looking north. It shows that the proposed development will frame rather than block the views from 2nd Avenue looking northeast. The building steps back to avoid encroaching in the hydro right-of-way, which reduces its apparent massing. Viewpoint D shows the proposed development from the playground area of Stan Clark Park. This is the location in the park where staff have consistently observed the largest number of people. Viewpoint D shows that the existing trees in the park already obscure views and that the proposed development will have limited impact. The direction of travel through Stan Clark Park is typically east-west in nature, and the view of the chief appears to define the public realm here, a view that will not be impacted by this development. The proposal largely conforms to the zoning requirements with the exception of the following variants. The applicant proposes to reduce the number of on-site loading bays from 2 to 0. Instead, the applicant is proposing that a loading bay be located on 2nd Avenue. Staff are supportive of the proposed variance based on the following rationale. Laneways are typically a desirable place to perform the majority of loading. However, this particular laneway is limited in both length as it comes to a dead end at Stan Clark Park with no dedicated turnaround, as well as its width, as it's only 6 meters wide. Victoria Street is currently undergoing a redesign and is envisioned to be a more pedestrian-focused area. Any loading that would occur in this lane would be required to back out onto this pedestrian-focused area as there is limited space to turn around in the lane. This could become a safety hazard. And there's a significant lack of on-street loading in the downtown. Staff have heard from several delivery drivers who struggle to find appropriate places to park when delivering packages and goods. By locating loading bays on-street, multiple developments will benefit from them. District and legislative processes were followed for this application and no comments were received. Staff did speak with 2 concerned neighbors and their representatives. The first concern was regarding congestion in the lane, followed by a request to reconnect the lane through Stan Clark Park. Staff indicated that there were no plans to reestablish the lane through the park. No formal comment was submitted. The second concern is regarding protecting 2 oak trees and 1 cherry tree whose drip lines are on 1360 Victoria. Staff have indicated that a tree permit will be required as part of this development. If the developer is unable to protect the trees, they will need to provide tree replacement offsite as compensation. Prior to the meeting, Council forwarded questions to staff during the presentation, so I'll go through the questions and answer them in the next 2 slides. The first question was whether or not the roof design changed or if it was reassessed under the guideline. The design of the roof did not change. The applicant provided more detail about the roofing system, which is like colored roofing cap sheet, which is both reflective and emissive. This was then assessed against the guidelines. The roof as proposed meets the guideline. A question was asked about whether or not the roof was potted plants or a fully planted soil roof, and whether or not we have an objective measure of whether or not something is a green or living roof. Sarah clarified that the live roof system is detailed on landscape drawing 4, which shows that it is 8-inch deep soil over an irrigation system fully planted with live roof mix as described in landscape drawing 4. A live roof mix is used, which includes perennials, grasses, and bulbs. The landscape drawings do not appear to indicate that there are plants in pots on the roof or out in the outdoor amenity space other than the 1 continuous planter that is proposed to screen the residential units adjacent to the outdoor amenity space. A plant list for this is identified on landscape drawing number 2. In terms of measures on whether the roof is green or living, we look for the obvious factors such as planting or vegetation on the roof. While the guidelines encourage removers for stormwater mitigation and to improve the appearance of flat roofs, it is not something that we can mandate through the DPA guidelines, so it's one of those areas where we work with the applicant on a voluntary basis. The question was asked if we have any leverage to ensure the long-term maintenance of features such as the green roof, the light color roof, or the architectural canvas. The short answer is no. Long-term maintenance of these features fall to the strata. As with all of these DPA guidelines, staff would only need to approve any significant changes to the form and character of the building over the long run. Council requested staff clarity to the final value of the landscape bonding. The final value is the value of the motion. The permit has been revised and was distributed tonight on blue paper to reflect the correct amount. The second question was asked what penalties the municipality could impose if a developer did not complete landscape works within 24 months or to the district's satisfaction. Staff note that most developments are not completed within 24 months. The DP bonding is only for on-site works and not for off-site works, which would include street trees, sidewalk furnishings, etc. Off-site works are collected through the servicing agreement and typically take much longer to complete. Our landscape security policy sets out multiple steps that must be completed in order for bonding to be returned to the applicant. This includes an initial inspection by the landscape architect and follow-up inspections with district staff. Developers are given deficiency lists to address. Landscape bonding is not returned until the work is complete. No penalties beyond this are applied, nor does legislation allow for any other penalties to be applied. Council asked whether or not we should be referring to the tree bylaw within the development permit, as the tree bylaw does apply. Staff reviewed and did not identify any additional benefits to referencing the tree bylaw in the development permit. If the tree bylaw will still apply, and often applies in situations where no development permit is issued. The applicant and all relevant staff are aware that the tree bylaw applies in this situation. Finally, there was a question as to the timing of the comprehensive downtown view study. We do have this work identified in our work plans, but it isn't scheduled for 2020. It may be possible to do this as part of the Downtown Streetscape Standards project, which is occurring this year and next. That involves developing standards for railing, slides, paving material, etc. in the downtown, but we are careful about not allowing the scope to creep too much. Staff recommend that council approve development permit number 501, conditional on the provision of on-site landscape bonding, the provision of $135,000 cash in lieu to be placed in the alternative forms of transportation fund, the registration of a flood covenant of title, and that council approve the variance to section 42 for development permit number 501, and that the mayor and general manager be authorized to execute the development permit.
Thank you. So council, I'll open up the floor to you first before I go to the public. I have a question. Council Tango.
So just looking again at the viewscapes, I think you mentioned that along Victoria, and it looks like there is a relatively significant obstruction of the view to the chief. And then just looking at the drawings, I'm thinking page 62 of our package, there's usable open space parallel to Victoria Street on the other side of the building. Is there a reason why the top 4 floors wouldn't be shifted to that side and having the usable open space along Victoria? Thus, would that expose more of the chief and improve that viewscape? Or is that something that our policy would even allow us to consider it?
If I may, through you, Mayor, I think we're in a bit of a gray area here with the view study not being completed to contemplate which views are important and which views the guidelines refer to. So at this point, what we're using are places of gathering that we know are where people are gathering now, or where there's strong potential for future. In this case, there doesn't appear to be a potential in this location. I think if that massing shifted, there will always be a place somewhere where the impact then becomes greater. So it's a matter of deciding where the biggest impact would be from a public use perspective, and in this general area, that would be the park.
You good?
Just one more.
Yeah.
So if we have no sort of long-term mechanism to enforce like the architectural canvas and maintenance of those things, would that tend to give us a preference towards a more fixed structure, especially in the case of an architectural canvas, like some sort of metal, more arguably permanent structure? Or, just sort of in general, are we comfortable, given our policy objectives, with something like architectural canvas, which maybe it's my misunderstanding, but to my mind seems a lot more sort of temporary, or potentially temporary?
So I think that that's simply the nature of DPA guidelines, in that we approve a development, we make sure it gets built to those standards, and then over time, the only thing that is for sure is that change will happen. I think, yes, maybe there is a bit more of a risk that that canopy gets changed, but it is meant to be flexible, and we're trying to balance the need for solar gain in the building. So I think the fact that this canopy is sort of further away from the building, and because it's a canopy, I think it's also able to cover a larger area. So in this case, we concluded that it meets the guideline.
Any other questions? Councilor Hepburn?
Thank you. I thought the canvas solution was great, and I was happy to see it. From my understanding, that's sort of Canada Place level stuff is what I'm thinking. It's not a tarp on some rope to blow away in the first wind or anything like that. This is a pretty, and I hope we see more of this around. These can be used in our parks, and we're talking about engaging our neighborhood, sort of our public spaces. So I think that I'd like to see more of that, and that was a great solution to that. And yeah, that was, I'm happy with the rest of it, but that was I was interested to see what was going to come forward. I was happy to see that as a solution. So.
Okay, okay. Councilor Stoner, and then I'll go to the public.
Can I just clarify that our calculation for employment space, the percentage is the floor area, anything other than residential, right? So it can include commercial, retail, restaurant, all those things.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so the proponent and members of the public do have an opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting the following requested variance. And this is variance to section 42.4, off-street loading requirements from 2 off-street loading spaces as required to 0 off-street loading spaces are required. So if anyone would like to speak to that this evening, please approach the podium and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address, and people will have a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. So is there anyone, whether proponent or members of the public, that wish to speak this evening? Marion. Seeing none. Council, are there any further questions? All right. Anybody want to put forward a motion at this point? Councilor Ritz.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Stoner. Councilor Ritz, would you like to speak to this?
I will, thank you. When I came before us a couple of weeks ago, I said I liked the building, and I guess the simple statement is I still like the building. And I think the added information, I think, just fleshes out some of the concerns the council had. The one that I did want to comment on is the view issue, because it's not unique to this building, but I mean, as we go through the downtown area particularly, and start to densify and sort of implement the policies that we've set in place over the last decade or so, inevitably there will be some compromises in views. I mean, clearly that building is going to impede more than the vacant lot that exists there now. And I think, you know, the key thing for me is not protruding into the streetways and the public areas. We've provided some places in the downtown area where views will not be impeded, and from the park, particularly opposite City Hall here, right through to the water is consistent parkland. So for example, those views I think are good for all time. We've also, and we had comments when we started approving development along the Blind Channel, it blocked the views, but I think it was pointed out by members of the council last term. That's why we provided the public walkway, because you can just walk to the walkway and then you have the views you want that is unimpeded. And so I think views will change a little bit depending on where you are in the downtown. It's impossible to build anything without losing the view from some angles at least, and depending on how close to the building you are, that can be almost everything that you might see. But I think that's inevitable when we carry out this policy we have of densifying downtown and going to buildings. This building, I think, you know, makes the best of that spot. It's a relatively small area. To me, it's an imaginative form of construction or design rather, that doesn't just sort of sit there as a box, and there's a lot of features around it which I think are quite attractive given the constraints of the site. So I'm happy to approve this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Stoner.
I will also be voting in support of this motion. As we all know, this came to us a few weeks ago, and I think the additional information that's come forward has been helpful. It was the first time that we're using these DP area guidelines. So I think we're all just kind of testing out what that looks like. The additional information that's come forward, the changes that were made for the outdoor covered space, I think are really positive and put us closer to where the intent was with those guidelines. In addition, the additional information for the view corridors has also been really helpful. This photo in particular, to me, I agree with my colleague Councillor Race that There will be impacts on the views in terms of what, as we densify in the downtown, that's inevitable. But identifying, I think, kind of that longer term strategy, and I think this is a discussion for council in our 2020 budget and your guys' work plan and planning, is how soon do we need to identify where those key areas downtown are for long-term view maintenance. To me, it's not overly concerning from Victoria Street here, but my question is, do we have that longer term strategy of where are those particular areas downtown? I haven't seen that written out anywhere. So there may have been previous council discussions around it, but there isn't something that's concrete for me to turn to at this point. So that to me is something that's raised through this process. The other piece to me is whether that 20% employment in the CD4 is really the best minimum viable for employment space moving forward, given kind of the mix that we're trying to achieve. We're not going to hold this particular application back on that, but that's another piece that's running through my mind in future. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other comments before I call the question? Councilor Pango.
I will be supporting this, but I do, I don't think we've hit the mark yet on our viewscapes. And I also, with some of the forums I've been to recently, I think we do need to move more aggressively in terms of our climate mitigation and adaptation. But I think that's policy work for us to do in terms of our existing policy and what this building is proposing. I think it meets that sufficiently. I think as a community that I'm eager to see us move a little further faster in general, but I will support this.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we now have a section 57 notice on title at 1018 Regency Place.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Chad William, Building Inspector. This presentation is fairly simple tonight. What we're looking for is support on another challenging file, if you will. This originally came to us as a complaint of an unpermitted secondary suite in 2018. We confirmed that there was, in fact, an unpermitted suite, although we weren't given access to the suite at that time. In this case, it's somewhat of a lack of information that we have that's driving the push forward on this. So what we don't know is the code compliance or bylaw compliance. We do know that there is an unpermitted suite contrary to our bylaws. We did receive an incomplete application from the property owner in January of 2018 that we rejected. There was insufficient information. And since that time, there's been virtually no communication. So we've kind of been in stalemate since then, with the exception of yesterday, where I've had a brief conversation with the property owner, sort of discussing some path forward towards compliance. So the motions tonight are two motions under the community charter under section 57. The first motion would be to instruct the corporate officer to place a building bylaw and building code contravention notice on the property title. And then the second motion under 274 of the charter would be to instruct the corporate officer in her discretion to seek injunctive relief if compliance is not achieved within 6 months from today's date. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this file? Councilor Stoner?
So I recognize that our process is complaints-based. There are a number of illegal suites in Squamish with varying degrees of life safety. So why are we acting on this one relative to others?
Through you, Mayor, it is complaint-driven. So once one comes to our attention, we act on that. In this case, the risk is no less important to address. It's just that it came to us through a complaint file, through a complaint, and we have to move forward sort of as we receive those.
If I can just add to that also, there are a lot of secondary suites in Squamish that we know are unpermitted. However, in most cases, we work with the landowners to some form of resolution. Sometimes it's just a matter of confirming that there's no major issues if we can get access to the property, because sometimes it is very expensive to bring it up to code standards. However, in some cases, such as this one, we simply don't get access to the property, and this is a tool for us to further that compliance. So this more than half the time, means that we will get action from the property owner.
Do we have a broader strategy for trying to encourage these suites to be daylighted, or are we just kind of maintaining at this kind of complaints-driven process at the time
If we our strategy so far has been very minimal fees for getting a building permit. I think most of the time it's under somewhere around $100 to get your suite permitted. From our review perspective, there may be other costs involved, and we will be exploring any further financial incentives we might have as part of the short-term rental discussion as well. We're in communications with our finance department to see if there's any potential.
Do we do any triaging of complaints in the sense of, some complaints where they are identifying for us a very obvious life safety issue that we can verify versus something that might just be a dispute between neighbors and identify there's no permit, but beyond that we don't really necessarily know if there's a specific immediate life safety issue?
Through you, Mayor Elliott, we do identify that there is a bit of a vexatious side to some neighborly disputes, and it does generate workflow in our department. We try to weed those out, and we try to do our best to identify what the nature of the complaint is. It's not a perfect science. If someone identifies a valid concern, whether or not that's actually the valid concern, it's not always crystal clear. So we tend to just follow through them until we can get to the bottom of what the complaint is. But as Jonas said, we do try to work with the owners to find a path of least resistance so that we can resolve.
And we do triage complaints, like if it's an obvious life safety risk, we try to advance that quickly through the process. Sometimes it won't even come to the Section 57, we'll go straight to an injunction process, recommendation to council. And like I said, with secondary suites, we try to work with the owners. If we don't get any traction, then this is our only tool.
So I just want to check to see if the owner or the owner's representative is here to speak on their behalf this evening. They do have an opportunity to do that.
Mayor, I did speak with the owner on the phone yesterday afternoon, and he did say that he would likely not be here. But he did also say that his intention in the near future was to work with us. But he didn't think he was going to make it.
Any further questions, Council? Yeah, Councilor Harper.
Thank you. In this process, where does the do not occupy come in relation to these, and is that and when do you consider that step? I know there's a lot of unknown here. I can see, but
That's correct. Through you, Mayor Elliott, we try to tread carefully when we post a do not occupy notice, because it is a legal order that we have to enforce as soon as it's posted. In this case, a lot of the issue is what we don't know, and by posting a do not occupy notice, we ultimately put someone on the street until this matter is resolved. So that's why we're trying to push as quickly through an official process as we can without sort of displacing a family in the meantime. It's a bit of I suppose it's a balancing act on either side, but that's kind of the path that we've chosen to take in this case. The other side, we've had some legal review that once we've identified a clear non-compliance or life safety issue that warrants that order, then that's the best time to place.
Thank you.
So I will move the staff recommendation, both motions, both to implement the section 57 and also provide direction to the corporate officer should compliance not be achieved in 6 months. Seconded by Councillor Snower. I don't have any further comments. Anyone else? French?
As someone who works in the building industry, it's disappointing for me to see complaints like this. And I commend the person who was bold enough to submit the complaint that has gotten us to this position. The person who filed the complaint may well have saved their life by doing this. I totally support the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you for the support, Council.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is first 3 readings of the District of Squamish Single-Use Items Reduction Bylaw number 2703, 2019. And related to this, staff, will you be presenting all 3 of the bylaws in the same presentation?
Yes.
So the municipal ticket information bylaw and the notice enforcement bylaw?
Yes.
Okay, so all of these will be presented in the same presentation and then we'll vote on them separately.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and those tuning in online. My name is Keely Kidner. I'm the Outreach Sustainability Coordinator. And I just want to remind everyone that I am hard of hearing, and as you can probably tell from my voice, I'm suffering from a horrible head cold. So it's making me a little bit more deaf tonight, so I may need to ask for people to repeat themselves. Just a reminder not to cover your mouth. I will be reading lips, and I might be relying on Mr. Wickham to help me out. So today I'll talk briefly about the background leading up to the single-use items reduction bylaw, discuss the contents, and then next steps, budget considerations, and then we'll get to the resolutions. To start off, single-use items are ubiquitous and they become trash or recycling after minimum use. This poses significant financial and environmental impacts on our waste management, as well as community values and priority areas. As a result, in February 2019, Council carried the resolution to ban single-use plastic bags and straws with an options for an overall single-use plastic ban. In the summer, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy released their Plastics Action Plan consultation, and that included discussions about possible bans on single-use packaging. We submitted an individual letter as well as a joint submission with 29 other signatories of local governments. Recently, at the September 17th Committee of the Whole meeting, I presented the proposed bylaw contents. Council directed staff to pursue an escalating fee-based checkout bag regulation, as well as the recommended accessibility-based straw regulation. So very quickly, the bylaw goals I wanted to highlight. The goals of the bylaw are to achieve a significant reduction in the consumption of all single-use items, including plastics, and to hopefully encourage an overall behavior shift to reusing items. This will be achieved through extensive education and outreach, through charges for single-use items, and customer prompts, which are written into the bylaw. As you can see from the image here, we are focusing most of our efforts on the higher part of the waste hierarchy, encouraging people to rethink and refuse and reduce. However, there will be cases where customers will need to use single-use items, and the bylaw in that case will regulate any residual consumption of these single-use items. To talk briefly about bags, through research, staff learned that different materials have different environmental impacts, and most importantly, that bringing your own bag has the lowest environmental impact. Plastic bags next have some level of impact, and paper has 3 times the impact of plastic bags. Non-woven polypropylene or reusable plastic fabric bags have 11 times the environmental impact if they're not reused. Therefore, our priority is to encourage the least impactful behavior, which is bringing and reusing your own bags. After that, we'll use fee scales to regulate the remaining bags according to material impacts. Through extensive consultation with people with disabilities, staff learned that plastic bendy straws are an important accessibility tool and that all current alternatives pose health and safety risks. Therefore, we want to encourage accessibility through the straw regulation and ensure that plastic bendy straws are made available. In addition, biodegradable and compostable plastics pose problems for local recycling and composting facilities. They're also marketed as environmentally superior products, which may lead people to believe that they can leave these items to degrade safely in the environment and may cause littering behavior. There are also legal considerations to the single-use items reduction bylaw. Most notably, the City of Victoria adopted their checkout bag regulation in January 2018. The bylaw was then challenged by the Canadian Plastic Bag Association. In June of that year, the BC Supreme Court upheld the bylaw, and a month later, the Court of Appeal struck it down. Currently, the City of Victoria is planning to go to the Supreme Court of Canada to have the bylaw reinstated. Part of the reason that the bylaw was brought to court was because the Canadian Plastic Bag Association argued that the City of Victoria did not have the authority under the Community Charter to regulate according to environmental reasoning. So under the Community Charter, municipalities may regulate business transactions. However, environmental protection regulations are considered concurrent authority with the provincial government and require provincial approval. The District of Squamish bylaw is similar to the City of Victoria bylaw and therefore possibly susceptible to legal opposition. The bylaw was also written with provincial approval as the assumed course of action, highlighting the environmental reasoning for bringing the bylaw forward. Without a provincial approval, therefore, any bylaw regulating for environmental reasons may be considered invalid. As you may know, other local governments have been also bringing bylaws forward to help reduce the use of single-use items in their communities. Even those who have adopted bylaws are also waiting for outcomes of the legal cases, and some have even passed their bylaws on to the province for approval. However, interestingly, while these different local governments are waiting on what happens with the court cases and provincial action, there have been many local community-led support groups creating bug shares, borrow bag practices, and things like that. So this is something that we would continue to support locally as well. In terms of the contents of the bylaw, in regulating straws, any business wishing to distribute single-use straws must incorporate a prompt asking customers if they need one. No business may distribute plastic straws unless requested, in which case they must provide an accessible straw which is made of plastic and can bend. In practice, this means the business will request if someone needs a straw, the customer may say that they have their own, in which case we achieve single-use item reduction. If a customer does need a straw, this business can offer non-plastic versions. The customer can take that, and then we have plastic reduction. However, if the customer requires a bendy plastic straw, the business will provide it, and then we ensure some level of accessibility. Similarly, bags, no business may distribute biodegradable or compostable plastic bags. Any business wishing to distribute checkout bags must incorporate a prompt. And if customers require a bag, the escalating fee schedule will apply. And this is 10 cents per plastic bag, 30 cents per paper bag, and $1.10 per reusable bag as per the material impacts. And this will increase 90 days after adoption. And before, when I brought bylaw contents to you, it was originally set as 6 months after adoption, and through staff discussion, we decided to lower that time. Similarly, in practice, the business will ask the customer if they need a bag. Hopefully, the customer will have their own. However, if they need a bag, then there are a variety of options for a fee, which will hopefully encourage people to then start bringing their own bags. There are a number of exemptions. Plastic or paper bags may be provided in order to package the following materials. I'll just draw your attention briefly to the addition of prescription drugs received from a pharmacy for privacy reasons. And also the newspapers or other printed material, which was part of the discussion last time. Staff have discussed the potential implications of this bylaw applying to newspapers and other printed material with staff at the chief newspaper, being the prominent supplier of these materials. Not exempting newspapers would require significant changes to the current model of delivery. And there are, of course, subscription deliveries as well as non-subscription, i.e. flyers that are delivered. And this is because the point of sale in this case is very different from how the bylaw is constructed for example, a grocery store. We also discussed practices to improve and contribute to plastic bag reduction in the current model. So that is something that we will continue to look into. Possible next steps moving on from here. In November, we have a number of options. The bylaw could be submitted to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy for approval and then adopted after approval is given, or the bylaw could be brought forward for adoption at the next regular meeting. Regardless, in 2020, we will begin education campaigns, and staff recommend as a result of the engagement we did, the business transition support and enforcement would possibly occur after 90-day transition period. And we would also bring other single-use items for consideration to add to the bylaw. Budget considerations. A part-time bylaw officer would be needed to supplement current staffing levels. We would need an increased detail level of waste composition study to understand how single-use items are impacting the landfill, and communications tools in order to develop materials to help engage the public and provide business support. That brings us to the resolutions that the District of Squamish Council give first 3 readings to the 3 bylaws and then submit the single-use items reduction bylaw to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy for review and approval. Alternately, Council can refer any or all of the bylaws back to staff, or Council can direct staff to bring the single-use items reduction bylaw forward for adoption without approval, in which case we would need to include an amended whereas statement. We're ready for questions.
Thank you. Councilor Pango.
So when I read through this, I missed the exemption for newsprint and flyers and so on. And I guess if I understood your comment, the concern of the newspaper and so on is that this would require significant changes to their business model. But in my mind, that's kind of the whole point, is we want people to make those changes. And when we're talking about enabling single-use wrapping of what is often unsolicited advertising, I struggle with how that fits in with the broader things we're talking about. And I'm wondering if you have any additional thoughts on that.
We, through the mayor, we spent some time talking to them and basically came to the conclusion, post the robust discussion on that topic at the community of the whole, and basically came to the conclusion that it would be tricky to incorporate this in and keep it on the same time scale and to be what, in our judgment, considered fair to the chief, to the Squamish chief. And so we brought it forward with it just as an exemption. I think that the options are we can pass it now with the exemption and continue to work with them. And potentially, if we can't find a happy solution for them, they're simply bring it back for revision after continuing to work with them. We can revise the bylaw now on the fly to remove that exemption. If we were to do that, we would need to, instead of making it a cost per bag and that sort of thing, and we would have to specifically write in for flyers and newspapers, plastic bags are prohibited. So it would be a ban in that case. We can do that. I guess the main point was we didn't want to delay the entire process around this one issue that had come up with the cow. And so we moved forward as is, and there's open to direction from council on that.
Continue.
So if I could just, when you speak about fairness, and which to me that implies giving them some time to adjust. I think we started talking about this in January, February, maybe March, I can't remember exactly, with the thought that people would understand that a clock is ticking and this is somehow where we're going. So what sort of timeline are we thinking is reasonable for businesses, or why does this business need more time to adapt their model than other ones?
Through the mayor, it was staff's judgment that a checkout bag, charging 5 cents for a checkout bag, is a very simple adjustment versus trying to figure out potentially infrastructure throughout the whole community in a very rainy town. It's just a trickier problem, and also it's not clear to us that when we flagged to the community quite some time ago now, back in February, that this was coming, that most of the discussion at that point was around checkout bags, and it wouldn't necessarily have been obvious to the chief that the writing was on the wall at that point. So it was a judgment call to bring the bylaw forward as it is, and we're open to council's feedback on that.
Councilor Stoner.
Specifically on this point, it's nice to have Stephen here around from the chief. But if I think about the plastic wrapped newspapers, the chief is one part of it, but to me it's actually the flyers that come in the plastic. And if I think back to the curbside tune-ups that were done, one of the biggest sources of contamination is that people get those flyers that's wrapped in a soft plastic, and they pick them up and put them directly into their curbside recycling bins, and it contaminates that entire tote. And so if that is the motivation here, is to in part reduce our contamination rates in our recycling, then why would we not simply remove that as an option here?
I can't answer the question as posed. I don't know why
That
we
is a
would.
fantastic answer.
I don't know why we would not, other than the answers I've already given as far as the judgment call we've made. Just to be clear, those flyers are a product of the chief, so when I've been referring to the chief, I'm primarily talking about flyers.
Any other questions? Councilor Herbert.
Thank you. I'm going to pile on the theme here, but in so much as the plastic bag as outlined was the lower GHG to the paper bag, this plastic that we're chasing right here is covering a bunch of paper that just goes in the bin. So I think this is a bigger target, and maybe not the bag that it is, but the actual unsolicited paper, which does have the GHG, and the plastic contaminates. There's like a compounding thing, so that jumped at me for a number of reasons. So I don't know how to capture that, because I agree we need to move on the whole piece. Whether that's regulating or at least opting into this service, there's air quotes there, of having these flyers delivered, might drop down just the consumption of all the pieces of that. And I'm not as concerned specifically about the plastic wrapping. Should I opt into that? That's part of what I'm opting into. That doesn't really, I don't think that's the biggest piece of this. I think it's the equivalent of 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 paper bags worth of unwanted material wrapped in the plastic. It does end up in the bin a high percentage of the time. So that's where I'd like to see us focus some energy in the future. But for this, I think we can move forward. Perhaps I don't know if this is an appropriate time to put in something that's sort of on the work to be done in the next revision, or 6 months, or a suitable time frame. I'm open to hear other thoughts on that, but that piece I think there's lots of work to do there.
Okay, Councillor Pagano.
Is there a reason not to contemplate bringing this back without that exception next week or the week after, like next special or regular business meeting, or is there?
So let's save that for the debate, and it's not up for staff to decide that, actually. It is up for 3 readings tonight. You could give it 1 reading, 2 readings, so there is an opportunity to bring it back, but staff would be directed, yes. Mr. Lee?
I would just say, with nodding and looking at the corporate officer, hopefully, that I believe with an amendment, I believe that's a simple enough change that council could tonight simply take that line out or make that.
Absolutely. We can amend tonight. We can
on the
send it
fly.
back to staff. We don't have to give it 3 readings, so we can give staff the opportunity to go back to the chief and talk about it again. Obviously, if we're referring this to the province, the timeline is, it's not 2 weeks from now, and we won't be able to start implementing the bylaw until we have provincial approval, and enforcement isn't 90 days after that. So it's not like there's not a lag time here for this organization or community. There is a lag time, but I don't think we need to debate the issue with staff anymore. I think they understand where we're coming from. It's up to us to decide how we want to go forward during this meeting. Councillor Race.
Thank you. And just on a process point, we are able, if we pass 3rd reading tonight as presented, to amend it before adoption, I believe, which could be, as the mayor said, sometime quite a ways in the future, given the province being involved. So we would be able to, if we chose to give 3rd reading to the staff recommendation, we would be able to advise some of these people like the chief, for example, that our intent is to remove that. And it might be 6, 8, 10 months, a year from now before we hear back from the province, realistically. And before we get to 3rd reading, and we could then at that time just take it out and amend it and pass adoption rather, without that exemption. And I think I'm correct in saying that. I just wanted to confirm that.
Robin Arthurs, General Manager, Corporate Services. If the bylaw that goes to the ministry is the one that the ministry approves, so if you amend it again after it's come back from the ministry, it has to go back again. So if you rescind 3rd reading, because they approve it at 3rd reading, and you're rescinding 3rd reading.
It's got to go clean to the province, I think.
If we were to have a motion to include a ban on plastic bags for newspaper delivery, get the 3 readings based on that friendly amendment or whatever, and then make that modification and then send to the minister, would that be the fastest, cleanest way to do it?
Right now, tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
We
right.
could do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I have some questions that I want to ask on different issues. Is it still on this issue, Councillor Harford?
It is just
Okay, go ahead.
quickly. It's also the contents of the bag. It's the single use or not used at all chuck. So I don't know how we capture that, but it's something that I want to make sure that we don't lose. I don't want to just deal with the wrapping of the bag of our greenhouse gas producing unasked for, unwanted piece.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm not sure we're going to get that.
No, I just wanted.
But noted. Councillor French.
Also on this same topic. So in the project information, we have businesses, grocery stores particularly, having the opportunity to charge 10 cents for plastic bags, increasing the paper bag option. Could we have a similar scenario for newspaper delivery where subscribers who feel they need a plastic bag, my house being one of them, the newspaper gets dropped in a very exposed area, and when it's wet, if it's not in a plastic bag, I have no newspaper. Is there the possibility of having a similar structure of charging for these plastic bags for that industry?
Excellent question. I don't know. I don't know about our jurisdiction in this particular. It's not the same as a checkout or business transaction at the till. And I don't know about our ability to regulate whether or not people give out flyers to people unsolicited. Both of those things would be things that we would have to investigate.
Did I see your hand, Councillor Stein?
On a different topic.
Okay.
There's some language in here with regards to accessible straws that the customer actually has to request one. And so I'm curious why we haven't taken a similar approach to just plastic bags in general, where instead the bylaw states that the business will ask if a customer wants one. But why don't we just flip it around and say we will only provide one if the customer requests?
Yeah, it's a possibility, through the mayor. I'm not sure. I suppose it would be similar to enforce, but I think that was the reasoning was thinking about enforcement. It could be a possibility.
One of the questions I had is in your matrix of do you need a bag? Do you want plastic, paper, reusable? Does that imply that stores have to carry all three, or can they choose one? Like I could only carry plastic if I wanted to, or I could only carry paper. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, you don't have to carry anything. We're not, the accessible straws, we're requiring that an accessible straw be made available because of the accessibility issue for that sector of the community. We're not requiring that people have single-use bags even, or any bags available at all.
I noticed that we left cotton off of our priced bags, but they had the biggest life cycle cost. Are we anticipating that through our engagement, people will choose one of these three options? They won't look at that option?
Yeah, I suppose because cotton is 131 times the environmental impact of a single plastic bag, we assumed it wouldn't be used as much, but there is a possibility of including cotton at that rate as well.
Your slides included a chart about all the other alternatives aside from bendy plastic for accessibility. Where is that chart from? Like, is that from an accessibility organization, or who is that? What is the source for that? It said something about a Twitter account.
Yeah. So in consultation with the accessibility or the disability community, this chart was presented to me, and this is an active, this was created by someone who is a disability advocate on Twitter.
I'm just trying, is this someone's opinion, or is this based on study? Is this based on organizations that work with people with disabilities? Is it?
I don't know exactly who this person or how many people she has talked to, but this is a disabled, for someone who self-identifies as disabled needing straws.
And this was given to us by the disability advocate or advocates that we reached out to in town who are active in town. They said this is the one, they agreed with this one, and we decided that that was an appropriate
I was
level
just
of
checking, because there's
advocacy.
some people on Twitter these days who you wouldn't necessarily believe. The other question I have around the things that we're exempting is the plastic bags for fruit and vegetables. Because we know the plastic bags for fruit and vegetables, because we know that alternatives exist there. And is our engagement saying that in this first phase that is too high of a bar to reach in the short term, or are we just being nice?
So are you discussing the exemptions?
Mm-hmm.
For fruit and vegetable bags? The first bullet.
Loose bulk items.
And, yeah. I believe this comes down to a matter of jurisdiction as well. That business transaction happens at the till. We're trying to regulate a business transaction. And the things that kind of lead up to that are a bit of a different thing. We didn't go down that road, nor have we seen other jurisdictions going down that road. Of trying to regulate all the other types of plastic packaging within the store, whether it's user filled or at the deli or by an employee or at a factory. We focused on the actual transaction at the till. Not to say it couldn't be investigated further for further revisions.
Other questions, Councilor Craig?
Well, there's evolving technologies to track your purchases, understand what you have, whether it's in a bag or cargo or not. So if I put sort of all this together, why could a store not allow people to load their single-use plastic bags before they get to the till, and therefore it's done before and it's not part of the transaction, and they just bypass the whole thing? Like, it sort of seems to me that, I guess I'm not sure what the difference is and why, if we can regulate that, plastic bags, why it's only sort of at the point of the till after. Like, I guess I'm a bit skeptical that that's where our limitation is.
Trying not to step on any particular wording landmines. The point of sale is a specific point where it's very clear that we have jurisdiction. I would say it's much less clear at other points. If we find people dodging this we will be out in the community and we will be enforcing and we will be working with stores. And if we were to find people employing leading edge technology to defeat the bylaw, then we can certainly go down that road and go for a revision at that point.
Can I ask a general question? We have a number of exemptions. And so obviously I want to commend staff here because you led the initiative to get over 29 signatures on this letter to the province. So obviously the province has a role to play in regulating single-use plastics. So given we've given a lot of exemptions here, it doesn't really force industry to start to adjust. And I guess, do we feel that we need to give the province more time on their single-use regulations before we address these exemptions? Do we take on the dry cleaning industry, or do we wait for the province to try and come up with their solution here? I'm just trying to figure out why we've gone with all these exemptions right now.
Yeah, well, part of the reason is considering the logistics of being a customer in a store. So, for example, bringing or buying loose bulk items, if there are no options available that are single use and you don't have a bag with you, then that's going to significantly impact how you can shop. And for example, prescription drugs, there might be some privacy reasons there. So these were discussions that we had with the community when we did our engagement work and through the survey, and these were also supported by the community. So I suppose it comes to a matter of jurisdiction and yeah, whatever council wishes to do. If we wish to take on the dry cleaning industry, then that's an option.
So, yeah. The balance here, I think, for this council is to figure out what we want to include in education and what we want to regulate.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're taking your kids down to get a live fish from one of the pet stores, what's an alternative way you can get that fish home if you don't want to take a plastic bag? If you're going to pick up your clothes from the dry cleaner, what's an alternative way? Can we start saying to dry cleaners, don't put my clothes in a plastic bag. I don't want it. It doesn't help me. So I think those are the things that the education piece is just as important as the regulation piece. And I don't think we have to tackle everything in our bylaw right now. But it does make me think about all the educational pieces that will need to come from this. Councilor Herford.
Thank you. In reading this, I thought of the another piece that came to mind was fast food, and say McDonald's drive-through or even in restaurant gives you your product in a bag. So as I read our definition of business, carrying out a commercial or industrial activity or undertaking of any kind, how has thought been considered, or what consideration has been given to that? I see this as regulating that. Is that the intent? That now we'll be asked if you would like a bag, and if you wouldn't, McDonald's is going to be charging for the bag at the till, and that's what we're regulating?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Councilor Reese?
Thank you. And I tend to agree with your comments with respect to sort of sending a message in education. And so I'm back on the newspaper thing because I'd like to send a message. And I, from my perspective, that's different than some of these other things because we have previously not really signaled to the newspaper industry that we're going to do this. And so I think we want to be fair and be a little bit user-friendly about implementing this. And so trying to think about how a clean bylaw, one that would sort of send the right message, might be dealt with. Once again, it's a process question. Could we have third reading with the addition of, and the exemption for newspapers will be withdrawn 6 months after adoption, for example. And that's the bylaw that goes to Victoria. And Ms. Arthurs is nodding yes, so that's a good sign. So, and I'll deal with that in debate. So I'm curious about more, we could do something like that if we wanted to send a message and give them a bit of a softer landing than just a hard take it away. So I'll deal with that in the debate.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Stoner?
The proposed fee structure leaves us at 25 cents for a plastic bag after 90 days. Is there any rationale for going higher than that? I'm thinking 50 cents a bag.
Through the mayor. We did a little bit of discussion. We had discussion with some grocery store owners who said that 50 cents, I think they said 75 cents to $1 could prove quite prohibitive to people. And my concern with that specifically was people who are low income in Squamish adding an exorbitant fee to them. To some people this might not seem like a very large fee, but for those who are struggling to buy their groceries, this could be a very big fee. So it was trying to find that balance where we're encouraging people. It's enough of a deterrent for people to not want to use the single-use bags, but also is not punishing those who are low income. So that was the reason behind that.
Councilor Van Gogh?
I'm just wondering if you can just explain the hesitation around prescription drugs a bit. in this, and the context for my question is I'm type 1 diabetic, so I have a Sharps container that I exchange every month or two, and with the opiate crisis, I am somewhat sensitive about what people might assume and not ask me about, and so I already use a reusable bag because it provides me more privacy. So that is my existing practice without even thinking about the landfill and so on. So I'm wondering why we think this would be a challenge for people, or what the obstacle would be there.
Through the mayor, part of my thinking around this was privacy for those who don't think to bring a reusable bag or don't have one. But also, I believe in some instances, so in a grocery store, for example, that have a pharmacy as part of the grocery store, oftentimes you'll pay before you leave the grocery store, you'll pay in the pharmacy. And in that case, the bag, often a paper bag, acts as a sort of signal that something has been purchased. So that would take a little bit more discussion and thinking about the logistics of how that might work, I suppose.
My practice now, and when I pick up my insulin supplies and so on, is I pay at the back in the pharmacy, and they put it in a reusable bag from another store, and then I walk out without any problem. I usually have RFID tags or whatever for just what I've, in my experience.
And just to be clear, sorry, didn't get recognized.
Yes, Mr.
Through the mayor. Just to be clear, all of these are all around what we are exempting or regulating or whatever. Certainly at any time, people can bring their beeswax bags to the store for their Brussels sprouts, or can bring their reusable bags. And a great, part of the budget is for outreach campaigns and that sort of thing. So although we're somewhat reticent to remove this exemption without further exploration with pharmacies and with affected people, it's certainly not saying that pharmacies must put all prescription drugs in a paper bag or anything like that. Certainly we want people to bring their reusable bag.
So, just in order to keep us somewhat on schedule and not debate this all night long, the original motion, if we go back to it, was to ban single-use straws and single-use bags by the end of this year and develop a plan for all single-use plastics going forward. So, what we pass tonight does not have to include everything. And that's why I'm saying there's a balance here between starting the education campaign and starting the behavior change and regulating the things that we find most egregious and that our community finds most egregious. But just because we have habits doesn't mean the community has those habits. And so we have to take that into consideration. This is something that will take time, and I think we have to allow for that transition. So I just want us to remember that we originally just asked for straws and bags, and tonight we're spending a lot of time debating other things. So with that in mind, are there any other questions? Councilor Herfer.
Thank you. Under the exemptions, item E is that packaged prepared foods or bakery goods that are not packaged. My last question was about the fast food, the drive-through, that bag. Does this prepared foods fall into that? And does that wording need to be cleaned up, or do we eliminate that to make sure we capture that, or has there been consideration given?
Through the mayor. I think that the considerations for this was around your typical grocery store where you have the bakery section. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if I can answer that.
It's a very good question.
It's an area that seems to use exclusively paper bags, which has been flagged as that GHG high, and I just want to make sure we capture that, because I think that's an area that we can impact with this, that is sending a broader message as well. not in every other town you'll get your food that way, and we're going to be prompting people and/or giving it loose. I think that's a huge shift from these more major corporations. So I want to make sure we don't lose that with this exemption.
Councillor Stoner?
Changing topics a little bit, one of the other pieces that we are considering is whether we send this for ministerial approval or if we just move forward with adoption. And my question is, do we have any sense, in your report you say that the City of Richmond and the District of Squamish have sent their bylaws for ministerial approval? Do you have any sense of when they were sent and or if they've gotten any response? I'm curious, going back to the mayor's comment of like we were hoping to do this by the end of the year. If we send this for ministerial approval, it could go into the black hole of who knows when it will come back. Do we have any insight from the other municipalities as to what they're working with right now?
Through the mayor. I have heard one municipality, just in the last couple of days I've been discussing with them. I think they had inquired to the ministry a timeline, and I think they had said the ministry indicated that they were waiting for the results of the BC Plastics Action Plan.
Thank you.
That's not promising. Okay. So, there is a motion before us. Sorry? Yeah. So we give first 3 readings to each of these bylaws, and that is then submitted to the Ministry of the Environment. Before any motion gets put forward, we do have to add some language that was missed in the bylaw, section 3.2, subsection B1, where we say we're talking about the price per plastic bag. It says 10 cents per plastic bag, and in brackets increasing to 25 cents 90 days after adoption. And we need to say of bylaw 2703 in each of those 3 lines. So we need to do it for plastic, paper, and reusable bag. That was just something that Ms. Arthur's alerted me to that's missing from our bylaw language. So whichever motion goes forward, it should go forward with that amendment. So, someone want to take a stab at this? Councillor, there you go.
I was going to move the first 3 clauses with those amendments you proposed, and I'll speak to that.
So we need to do it one at a time,
Oh, okay.
because they're separate bylaws.
Okay, I'll move the first one then.
First 3 readings without any further amendments?
With the amendments that you proposed.
Just the ones I've done
Yes.
on including that wording. Okay, is there a seconder for that? We'll see one. All right. Sorry. Is there another motion?
Yeah, so I'll move the first one with the additional wording you mentioned.
Yes?
And in addition, with the provision that 180 days after adoption of bylaw 2703, paragraph 4.1 sub I be deleted.
Can we just do that?
No.
So,
We can't just delete it.
No, you have to bring it back for, it can become, yeah.
so well,
you-
just a question on process.
you just have to-
Yeah, so I understand what Conservation is trying to do. He's trying to give,
You need to put it in effect.
We will-
At a
we would
certain-
need-
Yeah, bring back some, we'd have to bring back some word, because you have to say that it no longer be in effect, or there's some specific.
Oh, okay.
would be exempt for 180 days.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's why,
Something
yeah.
like that.
Go
I
the
think
other-
what you're
flip
trying
it
to do
the
is
other
give
way.
them more
Okay.
time. You want to try again?
Well. So I'm moving the first one with the addition of the reference you mentioned
Yes.
on those points. And in addition, to a reference to paragraph 4.1 sub I, which is the newspaper part. And it be no longer, that exemption no longer be in effect 180 days after adoption of bylaw.
Expire, maybe, did the exemption expire 180 days?
Expire 180 days after the adoption of bylaw 2703. And I'll speak to that.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion?
I don't know if that's good.
Make a friendly amendment?
There's a friendly amendment coming,
Might not be
Councilor
that friendly.
Ray. See if it's friendly.
90 days?
Yeah, 90 days. I'll go with that.
9 days. Okay. You're seconding it with 90 days, and that is accepted by the mover.
So, we've had different comments about different exemptions, and for me, that this is definitely a work in progress, and I have no doubt we'll come back and review this in a year or 2 years. The one that did seem to jump out to me was with respect to the plastic wrap newspapers. And from my perspective, as I hinted earlier, my inclination to treat them differently is because we were previously not focused on that, and so I don't want to mislead them. I'm happy to go from 6 months to 90 days because I think the reality is we send the message today, then it's going to be a long time before we hear back from the province and are in a position to adopt if we chose to go that route. So I think that's fine. But I think we are trying to drive a culture and drive behavior patterns. And I think, for me, the big thing about this right now is that it's sending a message to our community, and particularly our business community. This is what we want to see and start planning for. And these exemptions now, while they may not be sort of singled out to be taken out like that one, I think any business in that area will see the writing on the wall and start planning for alternatives.
Councilor Stone.
I'll speak to it as well, and there's been lots of discussion. I want to thank staff for their ongoing work on this. It's a challenging issue, and you guys have brought back a really robust report and bylaw, and I think that the discussion around the table is really just a reflection of how difficult and complex this issue can be. I think that, speaking to similar to Councillor Race, that there's a reason why this is a single-use items reduction bylaw, and we knew that there had to be flexibility built in so that we could amend this over time, because this is just the first step of many. We heard from the community through the outreach that you've already done that there's takeout containers, there's so many other components of our lifestyles that are single-use that we need to start addressing, and so this is one step in the right direction. Specifically with the newspapers, I think the exemption is important to put a timeline there, because we have spoken about it. It came forward in the committee of the whole discussion, and it is one of the biggest contaminants in our waste stream for recycling at the moment. And so to me, that's one of the biggest motivations to address that piece, is that there's a potential cost there for the district. And so to me, that's an important piece for moving that forward more quickly.
Thank you. Councilor Race again?
Yep, that's me.
I'll come to you, Councilor. This is your second time, and then I'll cut you off.
I know, and the reason because we're giving first 3 readings, the motion is to give first 3 readings. And I'm looking at the motion that's in the printed copy, which has a second paragraph that was submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, etc.
Oh yeah, that's true. On the slide, it's the last bullet. In the written document, they're connected with an and that.
So I was looking, actually, I had got the written one right here, and that was my motion. And I'll speak to that one aspect of it, because there are the other choices to...
This is where your seconder may not support your motion.
Separate. Well, we can have an amendment. I'll speak to the motion that I made, and it's sort of seconded. But I thought that was a good solution, because...
Can I interrupt you for a second, Councilor Race? So, just from a matter of process, Ms. Arthurs.
You have to have a seconder.
we do need a seconder. The written agenda in front of us has them connected. The slide is having them disconnected. So I need to check in with our seconder to see if there's actually a motion on the table.
That's right. If that was her intent, which was her intent?
What was your
Seconded.
intent?
When you were
My
seconding.
intent was to second the first resolution on the screen. So
Without the
without
referral to the
the
ministry attached,
Correct.
including the other amendments that Council Race mentioned. So you,
Well, then that's fine, then I'll save my comments and we'll come back and deal with that separately.
okay, so now we're clear. This motion does not include the referral to the ministry. It only includes the first part of the resolution, which is 3 readings of bylaw number 2703, 2019, with the wording I added and the amendment to eliminate the exemption for newspaper plastic bags after 90 days after adoption.
Of bylaw.
That is what we are debating. You're good. I'm going over to Council Pagano now.
So even though I unsuccessfully proposed an alternate motion, I will support the motion on the floor. My thinking or proposal was going to be, like in my mind when I read the Section 4 exemptions, they're all about bags, plastic and paper bags. You know, I think some of us have assumed at times the context of a grocery store checkout, but you know, in my mind I've been thinking of a lot of these sorts of things. And so I'm fine to deal with the newspaper piece explicitly as part of this resolution, but my hope is that within 6 months, we're actually coming back and taking a hard look at some of these exemptions, and that the community sort of takes this as a notice that we will, in my mind, in short order, be coming back to these exemptions. What's the other? I forgot another thought, so I'll have to come back to it if I
It
remember.
happened. Councilor Harper.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion. Given that it's provision for single-use items, our list of exemptions I think is quite short, given that we've got to-go coffee cups, single-use item, not explicitly exempt from here. These items need to be in the crosshairs going forward, so we can actually regulate this. It's a business transaction. It's right there. Do you want this in your to-go? Do you want to go? A lot of places offer 15% discount if you bring your own cup. We already know that works differently if the information is presented differently. It's an upcharge if you don't have your own. You just need to assume that. And on as we go and look at this. I'm not going to hold up this process to go through and pull all those things apart, but there's a lot of work to do here, and I appreciate the work that's been done. I'd like to do the opt-in for these flyers that currently wrapped in plastic that just go in the bin. We'd eliminate those. So we have a lot more work to do. I'm happy to see the work that's been done so far. I'll be supporting it with the amendment.
Did you remember?
I remembered. So, you know, I know that there's been some discussion that some of this was sparked by the students coming before council, and I really appreciate that and understand their rationales for being concerned about this. To my mind, though, this is an issue of sort of throwaway culture and the impact that's having on our landfill, which I do feel quite concerned about. I understand that plastic bags by themselves may not make a massive short-term impact on our landfill, but for me, this is leveraging the momentum around this, which is at this point coming around plastic bags, but it's really about a tool to that broader community, the broader behavior change, which is important, which will better deal with our landfill as a whole. And so in my support, that's kind of what's in the back of my mind. It's also why, you know, I'm hoping when we come back to the exemptions, the other piece that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with is the different rates for plastic versus paper bags and so on. I think, to my mind, that misses the point a little bit when we try and parse apart different kinds of single use. I think single use is the issue, and I guess I prefer a coarser tool that just discourages single use, kind of full stop, and keeps it a little bit simpler. But I am happy to move forward with this, and I don't feel like it's constructive to quibble on those details right now.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I find this whole thing a bit clunky and a little indecisive, which is, I'm okay with that because it's exactly where we're at. And like Councillor Stoner, I too see all the work that has gone into this, the consultation, the discussions, and I commend staff for coming with what you've come and presented us with. I'm inclined to support this, even though previously in the discussion I was thinking maybe we should just send the whole thing back to staff for another re-examination. But what I keep coming back to is all of this is going to happen anyway, and we will eventually get to all of the other businesses that are not mentioned here, like for instance, our dry cleaning friends. So I'll be supporting this motion. And I look forward to the ongoing evolution of this work. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, single-use plastics, addressing them and addressing search for alternatives is a worldwide phenomenon. We see newspaper headlines from around the world, governments looking after this. What I'm looking for is leadership from senior government. While I applaud the work that we've done here locally, and it really is marvelous and has caught on and been a tool beyond Squamish, my household is partly an internet-free zone where members of the household use cheap flyers, sort them, and utilize them. And we also, as a former newspaper boy, I didn't need plastic when I delivered newspapers, and I'm concerned about the contamination of totes. I echo the statements of Councillor French as we've watched how things evolve. I'm prepared to support the motion at present. I'm also a watcher of cellulose technology, and I will guess that we're going to be going back to the future using new forms of paper as we did before. For every single one of those exemptions, we used to use different forms of paper. We're going to improve that technology, is my prediction, and go back to that cellulose technology.
Thank you. So I'll support the motion. What's interesting is that we set out to ban bags and straws, and we're doing neither. But I think that will certainly influence my vote on the referral to the province. I believe that we are launching an education campaign and an effort to regulate business practices without imposing a ban. Because I think what we learned through your great research is that all we would be doing is pushing people to other unsustainable practices. So I see this as an opportunity to rethink the budget asks, because we only have $8,000 in your report going towards education, and I think it's actually going to need to be higher. Less on enforcement, more on education in the short term, and really making a case to people about why this is the best way to go, and showing them what the alternatives look like, and thinking about how we as a district support lower income folks to meet these new regulations from an equity standpoint, how we engage with schools, how we engage with a number of different communities on this. I actually think there will be a push from our community to come along with us. So we know that potentially this federal government will follow through on its single-use bans by 2021, and the province is trying to fall in line with that. So I see this as our first step. I think the education will be more important than an outright ban, because I think then we can get the community to come along with us. So I'll support this motion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On the next item, this is first three readings to our Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw number 1832, amend bylaw number 2704, 2019. Moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is first three readings for our District of Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 2705. It's amendment bylaw number 2705, 2019. moved by Councilor Herford, seconded by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Here comes the one that we now need to deal with, that the District of Squamish submit the District of Squamish single-use reduction bylaw to the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Section 9.4 or 5 of the EV Charter. Moved by Councilor Raines, not surprised. Seconded by?
I'll second it for discussion.
Really? Great. Seconded by Councilor Stoner. I felt like an auctioneer there. Going once, going twice. Councilor Raines.
Thank you. So I thought this was a good solution. I know we could take a stronger course of action. We could just adopt it next week and go for it. That may invite a court challenge, which in some circumstances I think is part of business, and in other circumstances I think is unnecessary. And I think in this case it's not necessary. I think by just stopping at third reading and not adopting, so we're not, it's the adoption I think might be a court challenge if somebody was inspired to do that. But sending it off to the province, I think we do a couple things. First of all, we don't invite litigation, which is an expense to the taxpayer. And secondly, I think we give the province notice that this is the way we want to go. And we add our voice in a formal way to what other municipalities are doing. And so I thought this was a good compromise to deal with this at this time.
Councilor Stoner, do you wish to speak to it as a seconder?
Yeah. I will not be supporting the motion despite having seconded it. I put it on the table for discussion. I think that we need to move on this, and we need to move on it sooner rather than later. And I think referring it to the ministry just delays that process. And I think that there's clear evidence that this is something that will have impact and direct financial impact on the district. As a result, it's something that we can take clear action on more quickly than simply referring it back to the ministry for a lengthy process. There are other municipalities that have moved on this, and I think that we're stronger in numbers as we continue to take that level of action of just going with it. I'm not as concerned about the potential legal repercussions of it at this point.
And I will not be supporting this. I'd just like to add, based on some of the discussion, I think an important piece of this is to learn and iterate, especially as we find out where we may have missed the mark in terms of equity, accessibility, and so on. And to put this to the province, and I feel like our hands are tied in terms of improving this, because the province is taking a couple of years to respond. I'm more inclined to push forward and learn and adjust and make this bylaw better over the coming few years.
Councilor French?
Thank you. I prefer to take what I believe is more fiscally responsible approach on this recommendation. And I agree with Councillor Rice. It would be unfortunate if we were to face legal action that would be a significant cost to our taxpayers. I prefer we avoid that, so I'll be supporting the motion.
I'll speak and then I'll come to you, Councilor Ford. I won't be supporting the motion. Happy to refer for information to the province, but we're not implementing a ban, and we're implementing a common sense approach to regulating business transactions. You can still get a plastic bag in Squamish after this is adopted. You can get a paper bag, but it is not an outright ban. And so I feel like we are doing what is within our ability to regulate. It's common sense. It gives our community time to transition to new practices. And it shows an ongoing effort to engage with the business community to find workable solutions in a timeline that is realistic. So I'm confident in moving this forward. Councilor Ricker.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion. I think that we've hit a sweet spot of what we can work on. I'm looking forward to getting on to the next part of this work, which is targeting those other starting the education and the enforcement, but mostly the education and working on those other pieces that we haven't quite captured yet. This process has been very enlightening as far as seeing those other targets already as I go about my day in town. So I hope our community has that same effect on our community, and we can all work together to reduce these single-use items. And the strongest way to do that is to start doing that. So I'll be happy.
Any other comments before I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Herford, Mayor Elliott, Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettengill, opposed? Thank you.
Point of order now.
Yes,
Mayor
sorry.
I would like you to use your mayorly powers and bring back for reconsideration the motion, the first motion, put it back on the table, and staff would like to propose that you remove the fourth whereas clause in bylaw 2703 in light of what just happened.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. So, Council, I am bringing back for reconsideration. It's the fastest I've ever done that. The first resolution we passed on this topic tonight, the single-use items reduction bylaw number 2703/2019, and putting on the floor a motion to amend the bylaw, or to give first 3 readings to the bylaw.
Exactly the
with
same,
the,
but with that.
with the exclusion of the fourth whereas clause. Correct? The first 3 readings without the...
Just exactly as it was proposed previously, but you're adding this one.
As it was proposed previously,
Yeah.
without the fourth whereas clause. Seconded by Councilor Briggs. Oh, I don't.
Yeah, no
I have
movers,
that
no
kind of
seconders, no.
power.
Yep. You're throwing it out there. You can bring that.
I will let it go to my head. A few opportunities to have that. So I just got to call the question now. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're good. I'm trying to vote twice there, Councillor Anderson. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all of your hard work on this file. And bringing really evidence-based research to the conversation. I really appreciated that very much.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I appreciate you bringing the research-based and the evidence-based information to the table. It was helpful. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody need a recess? Yes? Okay, can we, a 5-minute recess? Okay, welcome back to the regular business meeting. Thank you everyone for that 5-minute recess. We're now on to item 9.2, as we deleted item 9.1 when we amended the agenda. So we're now dealing with volunteer and composite fire department grants. Over to our fire chief, Bill Stoner.
Thank you, Fire Chief Bill Stoner. This may be a shorter discussion than the last one.
We could try and drag it out for us if you'd like.
Well, essentially, in a nutshell, I'm looking for permission to apply for a $25,000 grant. Specifically, the recommendation is that council approve the following resolution: that the District of Squamish submit an application in the amount of $25,000 to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities for a volunteer and composite fire department and training equipment grant under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. If we are successful recipients, if we receive this grant, we'll use the funds to further our wildfire training and our wildfire equipment. We require a resolution from council in order to apply for this grant.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any discussion? Seems like a good
I
idea.
think Chief Stoner summed it up quite nicely.
Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is rental and step code amendment to priority development application review policy. How to get ahead in building.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
My name is Jonas Vanishkus, Director of Community Planning. This is an item that we've discussed previously in September in a committee of the whole meeting, and it's essentially to update the priority development application review policy to bring the thresholds for projects that qualify for rental projects from 50% of the units to 100% of the units, and to replace all the references to step code requirements from step 4 to the maximum energy step code possible for that project. So for some projects that will be step 3, for some 4, and for some will be 5. And that's it.
Thank you. Question?
No, so move it.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, right.
Anybody other? I'm the only one with questions? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. Could you speak quickly to the, well, as long at length, I guess, but the, no, the to the highest code available, what are the limiting factors? I just want to understand that a bit more.
So for you, Mayor, for some type, it's based on building occupancy and type of construction in some cases. So for single family projects and duplexes, step 5 is the highest step. For multifamily, other than townhouses, it's step 4. For commercial, it's step 3. And so previously the policy said step 4, and that was kind of geared to the regulatory requirements that where some projects were in step 1, some projects in step 3, and some projects have never hit step 4. So we're simply adjusting that to go to the maximum step. So that was really the intent, is to achieve the highest step possible for those projects that would qualify.
Are we tracking and benchmarking how quickly these are moving through planning and building departments? So are we sort of, your report clearly says that there is an advantage for applicants that are pursuing this route, but are we actually tracking that? Like, so could we come back in a year and be able to report on who went through the process, how long it took, how much faster that was than other applicants?
Yes, we're tracking that by the time the project is essentially out of our hands. So when the building permit gets issued, that's sort of the end of the expedited process. And we have that information. I think I presented some of that at the last meeting. We are seeing a time savings for those projects. However, it's still largely dependent on the applicant's ability to move with the process. But we can certainly report on an annual basis on that.
Okay. My other question is that under energy efficient buildings, we're learning through our climate leadership team that the biggest piece to address the climate emergency is actually the energy going into the home. And so while we're incentivizing the highest energy step code, one of the statistics we heard is that a step 1 home with only electric heating has 1/10 GHG footprint as a step 5 home with fossil fuel infrastructure going into the home. So gas oven, gas fireplace, that sort of thing. So is there a way to actually incent those two things in this same change? Is actually zero emissions or getting closer to zero emissions?
Through you, yes, there is a way to do that. We are aware of the impact of the energy source, and next week I believe we're bringing a report forward that relates to the zoning bylaw update, where we will propose some across the board incentives, maybe related to floor area ratio, so that it has to be structured as some sort of incentive or bonus provision, but perhaps it is better to be addressed broadly rather than just incentivize
Yep,
few
fair
projects.
So prior to us banning fossil fuel infrastructure into homes, like cities in California have done, I think North Van has banned gas fireplaces in new builds. So looking at that, this isn't the place to do it. We would try and do that more broadly through zoning or some other mechanism.
I believe the benefits would be greater to apply it on a larger scale because this policy is limited to 5 projects at any one time.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Council French.
Thank you. So with that limit of 5 projects, I'm wondering if you have a sense for, are there 5 developers, 5 builders in the wings who know about this that will jump on board immediately? And will we have 5 projects in the pipe once this is enacted?
Yes, so we have had this policy for I think over a year now. We're changing it now, and we have had consistently about 5 projects. There were some times where there was a couple of projects in waiting, in queue, and I think right now there's no queue, but that we have 5 projects. So it seems to be full.
Good to hear. Council Paglia?
We're totally on board with using sort of more broadly applicable tools to ensure we're hitting step 5 and 0 emissions. But is there a reason not to also use this? And it's something we can do very immediate, even though it's only 5. Is there a reason why we wouldn't want to include that here as well?
No, there's no reason.
Okay, someone want to put forward a motion? Councilor Stone.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation moved, seconded by Councilor Herman. Comments? Councilor Stone?
I think we had a good, robust discussion about this at the committee of the whole. I think just as staff for the quick turnaround, and I think that this will just make our existing process a little bit more robust and help move folks towards the type of development that we want to see in our community. That's great.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Paglia?
Sitting here debating whether or not to put in a motion to try again for the 0 emissions. Wasn't quite successful last time, but also coming out of the livable cities, one of the discussions there with a number of the communities, including Oxford, Ontario, which is a fairly cold climate, they are requiring step 5 and 0 emissions for all subsidized housing builds. And actually what they're finding, and I confirm this with Saanich and Victoria and other municipalities in BC as well, that the incremental cost is 3 to 5%. And that's sort of the short-term incremental cost. You know, there's a couple cases where they found 10%, but generally it's in the 3 to 5% range. But the long-term cost savings, especially for the tenants, are massive. And so they're looking at, building high-quality buildings, because these are going to be around hopefully for 50 to 100 years. And so I guess my thought is to just leave this motion as is, but maybe I'll take a swing at things again when I talk about livable cities.
I'm happy to support the motion. I actually don't want to get ahead of the climate leadership team. I think that suite of policies should come forward together, and I'm interested to see what staff are bringing forward sometime in the next few weeks on other incentives to address our GHG footprint. So happy to see this move forward, and I do believe we will keep that pipeline full, because I think there's people interested in building to these standards. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up from Financial Services, Financial Audit Services Award and Appointment of the Auditor. Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Christine Matthews, Chief Financial Officer. Here this evening to seek an award for a contract for financial audit services under an RFP process, and to request council appoint a municipal auditor for the 2019 financial audit as per Community Charter 169, Section 169. The process for the RFP was joint. We did the RFP in conjunction with the Library and Squamish Sustainability Corporation. It was conducted in compliance with the New West Partnership Trade and Canada Trade Agreements. It was evaluated on a number of criteria as outlined in or on page 180 of your agenda. We were lucky to have 2 highly qualified accounting firms respond. The panel reviewed, interviewed, followed up on pricing with both proponents. And either party would have made an excellent and competent choice. Scoring was very close. Ultimately, a few factors tipped the balance for us, namely the depth of community, regional, and provincial-based local government experience, social and economical contributions directly to this community, and the stability of year-over-year audit teams beyond senior manager level. Staff is thereby recommending that the District of Squamish award a 5-year financial audit services contract to BDO Canada LLP to undertake financial services audits for the district, and that pursuant to Community Charter 169, BDO Canada LLP be appointed as municipal auditor for the District of Squamish 2019 financial audit.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor Pettengill?
Can you just provide a bit more explanation in terms of the scope of this audit? And in the back of my mind, and all the things we're hearing about climate change, our exposure to financial risk because of that, especially as our understanding changes quickly, and possibly, depending on what comes out of the climate leadership team, maybe more auditing of GHGs or climate-related financial risk. Like, where are the lines in terms of this audit, what they will or will reach our can or can't look at?
It's a bit tough to hear, but through the mayor, this is strictly a financial audit as required under the Municipal Act. We did not request any additional audit-related services, so we could, if council wished to look at that, we could look at some other audit streams in the future. We'd probably RFP specifically for those type of services. It would be distinct. Certainly, the current or the auditor being proposed here is very engaged in the latest issues for facing local governments in British Columbia. So if there was sort of a big movement, I'm sure they would see how that applied potentially to their financial audits, but at this point, it's not part of the requirements under the Corporations Act.
Okay, I'll move the recommendation. Second by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Matthews. Next up, Squamish Industry Innovation Studio Pilot. Ms. Mulligan from our Economic Development Department is here. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you very much. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to seek approval for the District of Squamish to implement in partnership a Squamish Industry Innovation Student Pilot starting in 2020 and to apply for supplementary funding to support the pilot's implementation. I'll provide you with a bit of background. So in the fall of 2018, the district's economic development team set out to form collaborations between academia, industry, government. And the idea was to strengthen the local education, training, and innovation capacity here in the District of Squamish. So as an outcome, a letter of intent was signed between SFU, Quest, Squamish Chamber, and the district, and the purpose was to develop an industry innovation program and applied creative learning studio. So following that, as part of the MOU, or sorry, the letter of intent, it set out that additional collaboration should be sought. And so we did reach out to a number of different partners, and we did secure additional collaboration from Squamish Nation, our local school board, SD48, BCIT, and CAPU. The group did come together and decide that a needs analysis should be conducted to support program development. And as part of that needs analysis, it was concluded that there is strong interest for more applied learning opportunities throughout the district and the corridor. That secondary students, because we did do focus groups with secondary students, post-secondary students, industry, academia, and government, That secondary students specifically mentioned they had an interest or particular interest in STEM-related fields and applied learning opportunity in those fields. A need for better integration of industry training and education delivery. Was also confirmed, and that industry would benefit from new talent pipelines, because talent is one of the key issues facing our industry in terms of their growth. So from there, once the needs analysis was conducted, a workshop was held between all of the collaborating partners to design a program approach. It's a very high-level approach at this time, and the idea would be that it would be nimble and iterative in terms of the preferred approach. So the group concluded that a multi-series pilot would allow adjustments throughout the process to be made based on the receptiveness of the community and our measurement of success. So I'll talk a little bit about who the proposed participants are in the pilot. So at this time, the idea is to bring together government, secondary, and post-secondary institutes and industry leaders to co-create experimental projects outside a regular classroom environment. And so along with providing students with the opportunity to work on real-life projects, the problem is going to support the idea of business growth and success across a wide range of sectors, in particular sectors that are aligned to our economic development priorities. So here you see that industry is sitting in the nucleus for this pilot, and the idea is that we would focus on our priority sectors. Students, both secondary and post-secondary, would play a role in the form of a cohort for each pilot, and there would be educational institutes that would be partnered in to provide expertise as well as space and equipment. And then finally, government and partners could play a role in also providing expertise, consideration on policy, and so on. The pilot structure is set up that it would encompass four-week design challenges to increase collaboration between educational institutes and the local Squamish industry. The design challenges would call on local industry to identify business challenges across a broad range of topics. And a panel of judges consisting of participating partners will select challenges based on a set of objective criteria. And once a challenge has been identified, supporting partners and physical space requirements will then be identified to support pilot implementation, along with the cohort of secondary and post-secondary students to actively participate. So the business challenge, we would work to set objective criteria to assess the merit of each challenge that's put forward by industry. For example, the innovation required, design or research-based, the broad implications that solving the problem or challenge would have, whether that's on the industry or on the community, the scalability of a solution, the multidisciplinary aspect of a project, and the civic implications it could have. And we foresee that challenges could be submitted by a single private sector entity, collaborating entities, or private-public partners. What I wanted to do is provide you with some examples of some success stories around models that are similar to this, but yet still slightly different. So City Studio, I'm not sure who's has been part of City Studio or is familiar with City Studio, but essentially this was started in 2011 between the City of Vancouver and SFU. The two founders were looking for a new way to engage students and government to work on collaborative civic problems. And so what they did is they basically set up a series of priorities and matched those priorities with particular schools. And then students came in and co-designed the projects and with the city staff. And then from there, the students go off and prototype and develop solutions. Finally, what ends up happening is they do something called a hubbub, which is basically like a big science fair that showcases all the solutions in the community. And it's been very, very successful. It's been running now since 2011. There's many other communities that are now taking part in the City Studio model. including Abbotsford. There's actually BC communities as well as national and international communities that are participating. The idea for the success of the project in relation to Squamish is that there are different streams, and you can either have a bricks and mortar city studio model, or you can have a virtual city studio model. So no bricks and mortar location is necessarily required to make this work. It's low risk. It's typically projects that city staff unfortunately can't prioritize in their coming year. And so those projects are sitting there knowing that this would be something great to work on. And so that's usually how those priorities are set. The principle of this project is that it's okay for it to fail and it's a learning opportunity. And so taking low-risk projects and working with students in that capacity allows some flexibility for city staff. And then once a solution is delivered, if it's something that actually has legs, it can be built out by city staff. It engages community in a big way because they do pilot all of the projects in the community, and there's some really great examples. I encourage you to check out City Studio's website. And what it does is it formalizes and streamlines the civic and educational partnerships, because right now I know the District of Squamish does use students in many different ways for various projects, but this sort of brings the whole process together. So that's an example of City Studio where civic problems or civic issues are in the center. So government is predominantly in the center rather than industry. Another program that I wanted to mention, I don't have any slides, is My Tax. So My Tax is very similar in what we're proposing. My Tax is basically a funding matching program where My Tax will match $7,500 with an industry contribution, cash contribution of $7,500 to solve a business challenge. And what they do is they match graduate students with a particular business or industry to solve a business challenge. They don't work in cohorts, they don't work in a multidisciplinary approach, but they definitely can work together. And in my conversations with My Tax, they're very eager to work on the Industry Innovation Studio as well, because they're looking for solutions that touch provide better inclusion. And one of the findings that My Tax has made is that typically the students that get to work on these projects with industry are students that are successful in getting into engineering. And then the faculty or professor will select them. And so what's ending up happening is there's a bias that's introduced, and they would like to create greater inclusion, in particular focused on different minorities, women in the workplace, Indigenous, and they'd also like to be able to start incorporating more high school students so that they have more exposure to these fields. So they're very positive about this. We'll offer a letter of support towards the Industry Innovation Studio and are eager to work with us in further developing the program or working collaboratively to tie the two programs together. So the anticipated outcomes of the pilot is that we're hoping to garner new local innovation capacity. We want to provide exposure, in particular to secondary students in their grade 12 year, to more interdisciplinary and team-based approach to problem solving. What we've found through the needs analysis that was conducted is that students at the secondary level are opting out of career choices very early on. And we feel that if we can provide them exposure through a project-based learning approach, that exposure will help maybe introduce things or give them aha moments that they didn't even think were possible in fields that they didn't think they may have been, that they were interested in. The idea is also that we would be bridging together industry and students, providing new talent development opportunities and a recruiting stream, and then creating new regional and local partnerships. The goal of this is that industry begin working with various partners, whether it's My Tax, whether it's local schools or regional schools, or whether it's completely a different type of partnership. But we think that new partnerships will arise from this. And then a real measure of success is that once the pilots are complete, that a third party want to continue with a permanent innovation studio in Squamish. So the idea is that we're going to facilitate getting the program off the ground, and that through the success of the program, that the program will be funded and continue. So some considerations, the budget. At this point, we have been able to confirm cash contributions from partner totaling $15,000, and in-kind value in the form of space, expertise, equipment totaling $50,000. That is from CAPU, BCIT, Quest University, the Chamber of Commerce, SD48, I'm going to try not to forget SFU, and I'm probably forgetting another one of them. And then as well, our goal is to apply for Western Diversification Industry Innovation funding for $90,000. We are asking for a cash contribution in 2020 to get the program going of $25,000 from the district, and in-kind value in the form of staff project management of $10,000. So the total project budget is $180,000. The organizational impact, there would be project management required on the part of economic development. We would be contracting a program manager, as well as securing a lab technician for the pilots, so we wouldn't actually be running the pilots, but there would be work to do to program manage that. As well as communications, we foresee the need to promote, like we do all of our events and so on. And then financial impacts in terms of grant administration. And so the policy that I want to touch on was just the grant policy and also the official community plan. So in terms of the official community plan, it identifies sustainable and diverse business growth as a priority area for the district. So policies 24.4A, partner with other levels of government, private industry, and organization to support business retention, expansion, increase productivity, and 24.4D, improve business infrastructure to meet needs for employment space, digital connectivity, and transit aligns to the proposed project outcomes. So finally, the recommendation is that Council approve the following resolution, that the District of Squamish proceed with an application for funding from Western Economic Diversification Strategic Innovation Fund to support the implementation of the Squamish Industry Innovation Studio pilot. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Anderson?
I had intended to ask about your comment on formalizing the Squamish Innovation Studio. You seem to satisfy me in describing it as not necessarily bricks and mortar. I would be interested as the program evolves how we check in on that and see how it's going. I wanted to target a particular area in among the target themes is green building technologies. And part of that is here today in Squamish, smaller spaces, higher density living. I'm going to quote from a recent advisory design panel meeting minutes, and it goes as follows. How do you approach vanities in the adaptable rental units? Will cake plates be attached to doors, etc.? I just recently visited 2 new developments, and I see all kinds of challenges and evolving learning on the part of professionals and builders as to how to design and fit out for these smaller units. And I think it's an important area for us to do well here in our built environment in multifamily situations. We also want to reduce the pressures on off-site storage. So it strikes me that this is a field with a lot of needs and then some potential for this program. We have in the interior design, kitchen cabinetry, bathroom, production, design, architects, a lot of firms here in Squamish, and they're also supplying services outside of Squamish. My question is, can we identify those firms and target them? Perhaps to some extent they already have been targeted in your preliminary planning, but it seems that this may be a field that could have some potential for this program. Interior design, furnishings, production design.
Through you, the Mayor. Yes, so in terms of the bricks and mortar, I just wanted to make one quick comment that the program is initially going to be developed on a virtual basis, and space will be identified at that time, and then we will be allocating space at SD48 or at a lab or wherever. As the program evolves, we'll see whether or not a bricks and mortar location would be feasible. I will comment that there are two streams, as I mentioned, where the Vancouver City Studio is a bricks and mortar application, and that one actually has accreditation programs. So for instance, they run UBC Master's program out of there. They run a number of their courses, and students are getting active credits in their post-secondary education. We have been talking to education institutes. They are very interested in looking at dual credit programs. So there is an appetite for that. Does it necessarily need or require a permanent home, bricks and mortar? I don't know. I'm not the expert there. But just to start off with, let's get the ball rolling in terms of just starting the programming. In terms of green building tech, absolutely. One of the focuses is really targeting our sectors, our priority sectors, which includes green building. I've already been talking to a number of businesses about some of their challenges that they're facing. Those challenges can have broad-reaching implications across various sectors. Some are very specific solutions for a particular business or industry. But there's nothing stopping us in our positioning on how we define a business challenge to make sure that we're actually reaching out to those businesses. So I've heard lots of great examples. I don't want to provide an example because I think it'll expose the business, but there's one in particular that I had spoken to my tax about, and they said that's exactly the type of business challenge that we look for. And one of the things that they said that really hit home to me is the industries that do R&D for a living. So carbon engineering is a great example, or a business such as that. They have R&D capacity, they have know-how. They will bring people in here and there, but they actually have whole departments focusing on this. My tax steps in and looks at the businesses that don't traditionally have R&D capacity or innovation capacity. So a great example would be a chocolatier. They're working right now with a chocolatier, solving a business challenge. They don't have the capacity. They create chocolate, they manufacture chocolate, they distribute chocolate, but they have business challenges as well. And that's where their post-grad students are coming in and working with this industry to help solve them. So it's a really interesting concept that it doesn't just have to be about working with large entities on highly complex business challenges.
All right, we've got hands over here. Is your hand up, Councillor French? No. Councillor Stoner, then Councillor Race, Councillor Hart.
Thank you for the presentation. I love the model. I think this level of collaboration is the way forward for these sorts of things. City Studio is a really unique example, and I think the differentiation there is really that first diagram that you put up, where in City Studio it's really is this municipality that is at the center, whereas here it's flipped, where we have the industry at the center. And so my question, quite frankly, is why is the chamber not leading this? And why are we being asked to?
Okay, through you, the mayor. Yes, that is exactly the differentiation between City Studio and the model that we're proposing. I will say that we are in talks with City Studio right now. They're very interested in further developing a model such as this, as well as with Abbotsford and with Whistler right now. We're very interested in creating a regional pilot. We think that there's a lot of opportunity there. To answer your question, why is the chamber not leading this? The chamber traditionally is focused on advocacy for business. They will provide training programs for business, but they focus on their membership. This is going to extend far beyond their membership, and I think that this has been led in general by the district, because when we have approached the chamber, they're happy to participate. They don't necessarily see themselves providing cash contributions at this time towards the project. So it's been driven primarily through the district to try to facilitate the project.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. The grant, I take it, is for $25,000, which is the number you have for the district's contribution?
Through you, it's 90,000. 90,000, and then 25,000 would be a cash contribution, which is actually taxation or budget.
Oh, and that's the part that's below.
That's the below.
Yeah. Right, okay. That's below the line of the budget right now, according to the report. Okay. So if we get the grant, then presumably we'll have to bring it above the line.
That's correct. Or, yeah, or we won't be able to act on the grant. I mean, the grant is contingent on the budget being available, essentially.
Okay.
Councilor Hurd?
Thank you. My question is on the same line. What was the closing date for this? I'm just conscious that we're heading into budget and the process we have to get decisions in front of us. This is below the line. I see that there's I appreciate that if we commit $25,000, we're going to get 90. That's good investment. But I'm just wondering about the timing and the urgency of that, and if that can wait till we're further into our budget discussion, so we can better understand why it's sitting where it is with.
So, through you, the mayor, in 2018, in the fall was really when partners had come together with the desire to do this work. We've already had cash contributions from SFU to complete the needs analysis. SFU has indicated they have additional cash contributions they'd like to provide. They need to provide those within their fiscal. That's one reason. So the challenge is working with partners to secure those cash contributions. We've done a lot of work over the year, and this was stalled for some time over the summer, and just trying to pull together all the commitments. My worry in this is that if we wait to apply for the grant, we lose momentum, and we'll also lose the interest of those partners. There's nothing the grant has no deadline. It's a rolling grant with WED. So the way that it works is that you submit an application. The application is continuously being reviewed, and my understanding is it takes about 6 weeks to find out whether or not you will receive the grant. So we could actually find that out if we do our work either right before Christmas or after Christmas. So yeah, that's kind of where it stands. So there's nothing preventing you from holding on your decision. We just won't apply, I guess, until we have the nod of approval to make the application.
Good. Or more?
No. Thank you.
Councilor Panga?
And I'm sorry if I missed it in your presentation, but did the criteria for the Western Diversification Grant, did that play a role in our decision to, rather than go with the city studio model, put industry at the center? Like, is that sort of a...
Through you, the mayor, I think a city studio model would be excellent. I think we should invest at some point, personally, on a city studio model. The reason why we focused on this is because economic development is focused on supporting local industry and local business. City studio models, you could actually get the curriculum for approximately $15,000, and then I think it's another roughly, I have the numbers, but 10 or so for various components. So you can actually get off the ground for under $50,000 with a city studio model, but what you need is in-house support to make that happen. So there is a resource consideration that goes along with that. So for instance, Abbotsford has a person that manages the city studio model on their behalf called a continuous improvement coordinator. So the reason why we went with the industry one was simply because we're economic development and we're very much focused on supporting our industry.
Sorry, was that a hand?
In terms of the budget, you said that there's consideration of making this regional. So if we were to go ahead with the grant application and things go well with conversations with partners, is there potential for that $25,000 to be reduced if Whistler or Abbotsford were to come on board and put $5,000 in the pot?
I think that's through you, the mayor, I think that's a great idea. I don't know what that's going to look like. We're not far enough down the line in our conversations around a regional pilot and other funding. My goal is actually to continue to try to encourage cash contributions. I would love to see us reducing this to it, maybe not net zero, but as close as we can get.
Is the Western Diversification Funding reliant on matching funds, or
They typically won't look at any application unless they see a matching contribution.
Okay, and then of the partner contributions, who's that $15,000 coming from?
So that is BCIT, SFU, and CAPU.
Can you put the rest of the partners up on the page?
So the rest of the partners are, I had a slide with partners on it, didn't I? There we go. So we've got CAPU, BCIT, the Chamber of Commerce, they're providing in-kind support. Squamish Nation is eager to participate and collaborate. They haven't said what kind of in-kind support, but Christine Baker is at the table with us. As I said, SFU, and then SD48 doesn't have cash but has space and is happy to create a maker space that we can use when available, as well as then Quest University. We had also been working a little bit with the Arts Council as well.
And so, question through to Ms. Matthews, when would discussions about this line item that's currently below the line come to council in our budget process?
Thank you. Through the mayor, we'd be coming when we do the general fund. I believe that's scheduled to start at the end of November or early December. We're going with utilities first.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me at the moment.
So we're not that far away from having a first look at the general fund?
No.
I suppose that's my hesitation, is that we're a few weeks away from looking at the general fund, and I think this is going to be a tough budget. And I know that $25,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money, but there could be something else on that list that we can not fund that may be more important than this. And this is very exciting. And I realize these partners have been waiting for a little while, but anyway, that's my hesitation. We're maybe 4 weeks away from putting the general fund in front of council. And is 4 weeks really going to make or break these partners in terms of their participation? I think that's my curiosity at this point. But council, what's your pleasure? Councilor Herford.
I'd like to refer this back to staff for consideration during the budget.
Is there a seconder?
Can I ask Kate a question?
You can ask a question.
Ms. Kate, can you speak to the mayor's question there? Will any of the partners, if you mentioned there's a time sensitivity with SFU's budget, will any of the partners walk away in a month?
Through you, the mayor, in discussions with SFU, they were eager to transfer money to us in this year. That's the only conversation I've had around budgets. But the budgets were confirmed in this year, so depending on their fiscals, I don't know. I'll have to revisit that with the partners and ask what that means to them. That's all.
I'll second Councilor Herford's motion.
Councilor Herford's motion is seconded. Do you want to speak to it, Councilor Herford?
Yes, please. I'm moving this because not to do directly with this project. I just think it's the timing, and I remember going through this process. Even last year we didn't go through the full process. Our first full process budget. I want to make sure that we make the best decisions that we can. I see that that this hasn't come above the preliminary line, and I'm eager to see why that is. And the other projects that are great and important that are currently below the line, I don't want to see them in the next little bit either. I want to get to the process, and I feel like it's a process thing, and we'll have a better understanding of what that 25,000 actually means during that process. I don't think I have all the information to make the decision on this spend at this time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Certainly I'm interested in this program, there's no doubt about it, but I would be kidding myself if I didn't think this was going to be a tough budget cycle, given trying to get our strategic plan implemented, and I know this is part of that, and the climate pieces, it's all going to come together. So I believe we're okay to wait and put this on the agenda following that first discussion of the general fund, when we have a better sense of where our available funds are. So I'm happy to support Councillor Herford's motion at this time. Not to take away from how exciting this is at all. All right, seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so consent agenda. Councillors, if there's anything you need to comment on, you should pull it from the consent agenda now. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, under the minutes, the special business meeting minutes for October 22nd, I'd like to offer a correction.
Okay, we will pull those minutes and put them under section 13. 13.2, I suppose. Okay, anything else, council? Okay, someone to move the rest of the consent agenda. Moved by Council Ray, seconded by Council French. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Very disciplined of you, Councillor Pengel. Is that a first?
First. It only took 1 year.
Correspondence to receive for information. Oh no, that was, sorry, all part of the consent agenda. Never mind. Correspondence action requested. We have a letter from Ms. Joseph McCullough from the Squamish Nation about the 15th annual Squamish Valley powwow. Looking for a donation. Just for context, council, it was in 2018, previous council approved financial support for junior girls, $675, and junior boys, $675, for a total of $1,350 for the last OCN powwow. So just that's an added context. So council, how do you want to consider this ask?
I was thinking the same. Move the same.
Can I ask Ms. Matthews what our council contingency is?
Thank you, through the mayor. We have approximately $25,000 left in the general fund at this time.
Is it the same amounts this year, Councilor Race? That's the only thing I'm trying to go down to find the ask and whether they increase the sponsorship amounts. Because we funded 2 specific competitions last
The
year.
same amount, 675 for the juniors.
675? Okay. Is someone going to second, Councilor? Seconded by Councilor French to provide 675 for the junior girls, 675 for junior boys, for a total of $1,350 for 2019 Squamish Valley CM. I will call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next, the correspondence from Ms. Lurondell regarding her request for staff to work with CN to provide a pedestrian crossing along the South Deck Trail in the Squamish Estuary. We refer to the GM of Community Planning and Infrastructure to look into and respond. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Also, a letter from Ms. McBride about parking in residential areas. That this corresponds to refer to the engineering department for a response. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Anderson. Question, or were you seconding, or did you have a question?
Yes, I'd like to suggest this letter also be referred to the Smoke Plus Park Advisory Committee.
In what regard?
The topic of Smoke Plus Park clientele parking on this street, Northridge Drive, and adjacent street has not been discussed by the committee in some time, and it is perhaps time for a check-in. It's not only Ms. McBride, but others around the neighborhood that have noticed some recent parking issues relating to the park users.
So, who moved this?
I did.
Would you move it with that?
Fine.
With that amendment is the word I'm looking for? Are you seconding that? I'm going to second it.
Certainly.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a letter from Sarah Bainbridge for a letter of support from the Chickamas Foundation for environmental learning. BCIT. This is a request for, sorry, I'm just trying to find the letter.
270.
They're applying with BCIT. And so I have to recuse myself from this decision. So I am in a conflict here. BCIT is a client of mine. This involves them and I don't want to have any perception of bias. So I'll recuse myself and give the chair to Councilor Herford, who is acting mayor, to guide this conversation.
Thank you. Council discussion?
I will move that the acting mayor write a letter of support.
I'll second that.
The letter will come.
She's in conflict too.
Okay, and they provided a form letter. Is that acceptable to? Is that the letter that you would be using? Yeah,
Feel
that's
free
fine.
to amend it if you see fit.
Okay. So call a question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, and that correspondence about a support letter for childcare space is up for council consideration. This is for a daycare facility being planned for 150 kids at Buckley Apple Avenue. Yes, Buckley, in front of Squamish Elementary School. It's open to 20 job opportunities. They have government support. And we need a letter from the city to make that happen.
I will move that the mayor write a letter outlining the need for childcare in our community and support for additional spaces without specific reference to any one company.
Seconded by Councilor French.
I
Any other comments?
was going to say, I think we probably have a form letter for this at this point, because we've done a couple of these. So happy to support.
No doubt we need childcare spaces. All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have recommendations from committee as a whole. Staff bring forward the District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2211 amendment bylaw for the CD 90 zones and Penny Way number 2529 to the regular council meeting for consideration of second reading. So this isn't second reading, it's just saying we should bring it forward. Moved by Councilor Stoner, second by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? All those motion carries. That the arts and culture and heritage strategy be received for information. Moved by Councilor French, second by Councilor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Anderson, the minutes from October 22nd for the special business meeting.
Yes, it's just a minor thing, but I thought we should make this clear as it may come up again. And this is under, pursuant to section 100 on page 1 of the minutes of the community charter. Councillor Anderson declared a conflict in the next item called the Country Club, as he is a member and director of the House on Curling Club. To be precise, I'm a past director. It should probably reflect that instead, a recent past director. That's all I have for that one.
Okay, so motion to approve those minutes as amended, moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have advisory design panel minutes from October 17th to receive for information, moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. No in-camera announcements. No unscheduled public attendance. Open question period for clarification. Mr. Chua? You're good. Excellent. Couple of council staff announcements. I want to remind people that tomorrow the film Us and Them is screening at the library. This is hosted by the Squamish Community Foundation and Squamish Helping Hands. It is at 6:30. Followed by an initiative of the foundation to host some vital conversations throughout the year. And this one is about the role of community and connection in healing trauma and creating a sense of belonging for all. So this film screened here a number of years ago. And I worked in collaboration with Maureen McKell on that. It was a very powerful evening. It is just an incredible film if you haven't seen it. And it really challenges your thinking about homelessness and addiction. There isn't a great divide between us and them, and there certainly shouldn't be that kind of concept. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage people to go. Also, on the 25th of October, a number of us attended the Palestine Community Forum. It was a great opportunity to sit with our colleagues from around the Sound, and we had a great discussion about practical solutions to addressing the climate emergency. So thank council members for attending. Those are my updates. Anybody else? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. Just this past Saturday, it was November 2nd, the library, Squamish Public Library, held a trivia night fundraiser at the Bag, and it was a smashing success. It was, I was humbled by the, I think it was the show tunes category took me down, but it was a great night. It was great to see the community out supporting the library, and it's always great to attend an event at the Bag. So when you see this pop up again, I encourage you all to come check it out, and I would challenge my fellow councillors to put together a team at the next time, and we can see how that works out for everybody.
Excellent. Councilor Anderson?
Yes, this past Sunday, November 2nd, I attended a Heritage BC workshop. Heritage BC being a provincial nonprofit organization that provides advice to provincial government and heritage organizations. The event was sponsored by the Squamish Historical Society at a good attendance, including very nearly all of the local heritage groups, but also a number of other community organizations representing festivals, arts, the business community, and neighborhoods. Devin Guest, our staff member heading up the Arts and Cultural Heritage Strategy, attended for the day. The workshop was one that has been presented all around BC, which meant that the facilitator could share a lot of news and experiences from other towns. We're not alone in struggling with arts and culture and strategies. On the agenda were heritage basics and definitions, heritage values, a mapping exercise, and how to convince the community at large, and not least our council, about the importance of proceeding and forging ahead. Setting the stakeholder groups up for the next step of dialogue on the details of a strategy is where we are now. And a motto or a statement that was repeated often through the day: heritage is the management of change. You'll probably hear that again.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. And Councilor French?
I had the distinct pleasure of being sent to jail for a few hours. And that was on Saturday, October the 26th. A fundraising initiative called Lock In for Love that was put on by the SPCA. Interestingly enough, I was locked up with Staff Sergeant Gareth Bradley. And so I was locked up with 5 kittens, and they were successful in convincing a bunch of my friends to donate $1,100 towards the SPCA. And there's some really great pictures on my Instagram if you want to see cute kittens. So that same day, I attended the celebration of life for Michaela Martin, and now I had the honor of living next door to Michaela for many years while she was growing up. Truly an extraordinary young lady. The only celebration of life that I've ever attended where there was very happy dancing. It was an excellent event. sad, but one of the best celebrations of life that I've ever attended. And then on just Sunday past was the 2019 BC Economic Development Association Ministers Dinner. Bruce Ralston was the star of the show, and he is the Minister of Jobs, Trade and Technology. Also at the event was Selena Robinson, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and Claire Trevina, Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. Councillor Pettingill was there, along with Mayor Elliott and Councillor Anderson. A very productive evening. I got to have dinner with Minister Robinson, some great discussion, and while I was the lone Sea to Sky representative at my table and the rest of my colleagues all got to eat together, it was a very productive evening with not just 3 high-powered ministers, but also a bunch of senior provincial staff. So all in all, a great event that was educational and productive, not just for me, but I think the whole group.
So a few things, and just to be clear, we did not exclude John. That was
it was
the seating that
that's
was
true.
for us. So I attended Livable Cities in Victoria last week. It's elected leaders and staff from across Canada. This happens every 2 years, and looking at ways to make cities and communities better for the citizens that live there. And this year, the focus was on the intersection of climate change and health. So I think I'll get a chance in that community as a whole to discuss this further. But it was fantastic. Yeah, it was great. But I'll talk more about that later. Yesterday, I attended a Displaced Workers Forum. This is coming out of a grant from the federal government for related to a 3-year project examining the effectiveness of literacy and essential skills programs for displaced workers in Canada. So it was really great to see all the groups, federal, provincial, and local NGOs that are thinking about these things in our community. We had a lot of really good discussion. There are some challenges ahead, but a lot of really great people working on it. So that was really great to be part of and to see that happening. A couple weeks ago, I went to the House on Performing Arts Aegean, and there were some young performers as part of the Aegean. It's astounding the level of talent we have in this community. The House on Performing Arts does a lot to facilitate the kids that are up and coming and learning to perform, and just fantastic and inspiring. Just on that note, this coming Friday, there is a jazz show, and Connor Lum and his trio from Cap U are performing. Connor has been a center of the Ant in the Park events and doing the sound there and really driving that forward. So if you like great music, he's a fantastic performer on all kinds of instruments, so well worth your time if you can make it out this weekend.
Where?
This is at the Eagle Eye Theatre, and you can get tickets at the House on Performing Arts website. Councillor Snar, are you going to talk about the emergency office? The emergency office thing?
I can,
Yeah. So,
And you throw the baton to Councillor Stoner. Okay, finish this off, Councillor Stoner.
All right, this morning Councillor Pettingill and I had the great pleasure to join our emergency program coordinator and one of our bylaw officers, and supported by SAR to participate in an emergency preparedness mock exercise that was hosted by North Shore Emergency.
North Shore Emergency.
North Shore Emergency Management. North Shore Emergency Management. Thank you, Robin. It was a very interesting exercise to observe. I think there were probably about 14 different agencies involved across all of the North Shore up to Squamish. It involved mass transportation of people over in helicopters, hovercrafts, boats, simulating that there was a 7.3 magnitude earthquake that would have taken out all the bridges to the North Shore. And so what that would look like in terms of moving people and things kind of 3 days post-disaster. So super interesting. Thanks to staff for inviting us. Definitely lots of lessons learned. And our emergency program coordinator will be reporting back on the after debrief to both staff and council.
Great, thank you. With that, I need a motion to close. We have some meetings to finish off.
We close this meeting, we terminate this meeting, and then go back into that meeting.
Oh, yeah, we recess that one.
Yeah.
Motion to terminate. By Councilor Rivers, seconded by Councilor Race. All those in favor?